after getting the last hit on the King tier beast and completing the quest. There wasn't much time for Quinn to check out the rewards or see what he had obtained. There was the problem with Fex, and shortly after the travelers appeared as well. It seemed like the group was having problem after problem occur. Soon after seeing the travelers, he knew instantly how they would react to the seeing Fex. It was hard for them to even explain themselves out of the situation, since Fex was currently attacking them as W. However, Quinn felt like he had a way to solve their current issue, only he didn't have much time to act. During the fight with the King tier beast, he hadn't done this action because they needed Fex in his bloodsucker form. But Quinn still had the flask that Fex had given him. Once he drank the blood from the flask, it should be enough for his body to turn to normal. Right now, these travelers that were trying to help were just getting in the way. Hiding himself in the shadows, Quinn started to think about his next move. What he didn't expect to happen was that the small group of travelers would be able to overpower the bloodsucker. After seeing him stab in the ribs and howling in pain, Quinn had had enough. I need to do something, Quinn thought. Although he didn't know what rewards he had received from the quest, there were two standout things he knew he had gotten without the need to read the system messages. The first was his level. Level 18. 107302560 EXP. 6 free stat points. With each level, a large amount of EXP was required when leveling up, and from defeating one beast, Quinn was able to level up 3 more times. At the higher levels, it would usually take a huge amount of time for one to level up. But Quinn was fighting beasts several levels above what he should be capable of. It was something the system had never expected. Before jumping in to help Fex, Quinn had made the quick decision to put all of his points into the charm stat. 22 charm points. This unlocked the next tier in his charm, and straight away Quinn could tell there would be a difference when he next used it. When facing against humans, or those like them, he knew the best stat to increase was the charm stat. His Phantom Punch had proven effective, and he also still contained the skills Daze and Influence. His speed was already great, and although he could increase his strength, based on the last fight, it was useless unless he also had the beast gear to go hand in hand with it. This left the stamina and charm stat. For now, other than not being able to use the flash step freely, Quinn hadn't run into too many problems with his stamina. He still would have liked to increase both, but it made more sense to pour the points into his charm stat for this confrontation that was about to happen. With no time to lose, Quinn needed to reveal himself from the shadows, targeting his blood swipe at the leader Andre. When the blood swipe left his hands, though, he noticed that it was a lot more powerful and stronger than before. This confirmed one of the other messages that Quinn had received. All blood-related skills have increased by 1. A blood swipe level 3. Blood spray level 3. A crescent kick level 2. A blood bank level 2. This was a huge improvement in power. It took a long time to level up his skills, and Quinn was wondering if his blood bank would ever level up, and it finally did. Although it wasn't much use right now, because it was empty. Why did you attack me? We are trying to get rid of this beast, Andre said, annoyed at the strange figure. It was clear the person who had attacked him was human, so he didn't want to lash out immediately and decided to break down into peaceful negotiations. There wasn't much time for chit-chat, though, for Fex had pulled out the spear in his side and threw it onto the ground. It swiped at Andre next to him again, but Andy was already by his side to block the attack with his shield once more. The two twins were now coming up from behind and threw out 2 wind kicks, forming a sharp slice from the tip of their boots. A few moments later, and they could feel something run past them at an incredible speed. Quinn no longer had any MC points to use his shadow, so he could only rely on his blood skills for this one. Catching up to the twins' attacks, Quinn threw a quick kick from the side. Blood crescent kick. A large red aura immediately consumed the twins' attack and continued to go off into the darkness. Annoyed at this, the twins continued to run forward. "Stop getting," one of the twins said. "In our way," the other finished the other's sentence. Making sure to make eye contact with one of them, Quinn activated his Daze skill. Daze Cessful. One of the twins immediately stopped as they felt a chill run down the spine. They didn't know what it was, but it was as if their body was being controlled. The other continued to run forward, unaware of what was happening to the other. Throwing out a fast punch, the twin was prepared to block the attack, lifting its two arms in an X-like shape, but the attack had never come. Suddenly, he felt a heavy fist in the stomach. Blood spray. At the same time as the punch was released, Quinn used his blood spray at close range, sending one of them flying backwards. By now, the other had been released from the stun and came charging forward, hoping to help out his brother. A kick was released at an amazing speed. Using the power of the wind behind his kick, rather than releasing it as an attack at the end, he was able to speed up his attack considerably. Seeing this, Quinn decided to match him toe-to-toe, throwing out a kick of his own just as fast. The two legs clashed mid-air as both of their shins striked each other. Who is this person? The twin thought. He's just as fast as me, and I have beast gear on as well as using my wind abilities. The gear he's wearing doesn't look like it's made from high-level beasts. So what could it be? While in the middle of his thought, he could see a flurry of fists coming towards him. He had knocked away the first one and attempted to block the second, moving his head to the side. Once again, just like with his brother, the attack that was meant to come had never come, and a fist came out from a different direction altogether, hitting him right on the head and knocking him down to the ground. With this attack, Quinn decided to not use his blood spray. 2295 HP. Using the spray with his punches once in a while and the blood swipe, it would continuously lower his HP. It was the big downside of using the blood abilities. Still, with the phantom punch other than his mind feeling more tired as he used it, he had another skill he could rely on. Both Andy and Andre, including the beast, were busy with Fex, but from the corner of their eye, they could see that the strange figure had easily dealt with two of their men. This had surprised Andre. The two Quinn had dealt with, they weren't weak. They were strong, and had gone on countless Orange Planet expeditions. They were even able to survive and escape a confrontation with a king-tier beast. It was why Andre wasn't worried for them and continued to deal with the bloodsucker, but he had never expected this. Looking at Andre's fight against Fex, Quinn could tell he was strong. The three of them were evenly matched against him. Even with Quinn's speed increase and power increase, he wasn't as strong as Fex in his current form. With the little HP he currently had, on top of no longer having any MC points to use his shadow ability, Quinn didn't want to do anything stupid like confronting Andre and Andy. He quickly popped open the lid of the flask and straight away, he was able to smell the sweet aroma of blood coming from it. "I hope this works," Quinn said. And just like that, Fex had turned his head, catching the same smell as Quinn. Now this was the hard part. Immediately Quinn started to run off in the direction of the tower, and closely behind him Fex chased after. The two of them went off down the street into the darkness. Both of them were unable to be seen, for they were no longer in the sticky lights that Logan had shot on the street. "Should we chase after the two of them, sir?" Andy asked. When looking at the two, Andre found it strange. It wasn't as if the creature was following the strange masked man like he was his master. Instead, it looked like he was trying to kill him. "Leave them be. We have to go back and check up on the students," Andre replied. Quinn had continued to run full speed ahead, activating his wind walk boots, but he knew it would be useless with the great speed of the bloodsucker. The only thing he could do was run into buildings to slow Fex down, while Quinn was able to navigate smoothly through them. Fex would bang into several items, or just use his brute force to smash into them. This should be fine enough, Quinn thought. In one of the abandoned buildings, there was a large room that was mostly empty. He quickly placed a flask on the floor and continued to run forward. He was still unsure if Fex would continue chasing after him or go after the flask. When Fex reached the flask on the floor, immediately using its clawed hands it picked it up and started shaking it and pouring it into its mouth. It didn't allow a drip of it to touch the floor. Once the flask was completely empty, the bloodsucker started to sway, as if he was drunk and was about to collapse on the floor, and soon after, he did. While looking at the body from a distance, it looked like the body was starting to shrink. "Well, I'm glad that's over with," Quinn said. While Fex was busy going back to his regular self, Quinn looked out the window and at the tower. It now was only a few buildings away. I wonder just what's inside there. Deciding not to chase after the strange creature, Andre and Andy agreed to go over and check on the two twins. They were no longer on the floor in pain. Their armor had managed to take most of the damage, but still, The strikes and attacks they received were powerful enough to knock the two of them down. Who was that guy? One of the twins said as he accepted Andrei's hand as he stood up from the ground. I'm not sure, and I haven't seen that ability before either, Andrei replied. Most likely an original that's on this planet or an independent traveler. What? Was it that strong that we haven't seen it before? The other twin replied. It was their job to know who was on the orange portal planet with them. After all, they would be working together and exchanging information while on the planet. They were sure that other than the military, they held the second highest position of power as one of the big four on this planet. There were other shelters around, but these two were the most renowned and where most civilians would take refuge due to its reputation. Hey, I think you better come and take a look at this. And he shouted others to the others. The three of them prodded for long, but when their eyes made contact with what Andy was looking at, the two twins nearly keeled over from shock. THA. That's the king-tiered beast we fought against before, the twins shouted. They had fought several times against the king beast as a team without Andrei, so they knew the strength of the beast. They couldn't believe what had caused them so much trouble was now dead on the ground. What do you think happened? Andy asked. Andrei then knelt beside the beast and started fleshing out certain parts of the beast's cadaver. They knew what he was doing. He was looking for the beast's crystal. Only after fleshing out several different areas of the body with his small dagger did he finally find the crystal. It was located where the human heart would be, slightly to the left from the middle of the chest. The extracted crystal didn't look like common at all. It was clearer and wasn't as murky and cloudy as lower-tiered crystals, but there was something far different in this crystal. It was the fact that it didn't radiate any light nor sheen at all. Usually, an extracted beast crystal would give off a glow. It would pulsate with energy as if the crystal was a living being. However, the crystal in Andrei's hands didn't give off any light at all. I'm surprised. There's still a crystal inside? How come it wasn't extracted? One of the twins said. Perhaps it was killed recently, Andy replied. Also, the fact that there is no glow would suggest that the beast had gone into a type of rage mode. Hearing this, the two twins gulped. They remembered how tough and frightening it was to fight this beast without it going into a type of rage mode. To be honest, the two felt that they were lucky to be alive fighting against such a beast. Perhaps that creature and the strange man from before were the ones that killed it. Andy said, they were the only ones here at the time. No, Andrei replied. There were others here as well. While saying this, Andrei looked into the direction of Vorden and the others. When they had arrived, it seemed like they were in combat with the strange creature. They were here before us, and they might have seen something. They might have some answers for us. Asterisk. On the cold floor of an abandoned building, Fex could be seen lying on the floor. Snoring sounds would occasionally come out of his mouth, as well as some nasal sounds that indicated he was in deep sleep. Quinn didn't want to wake him up. He had gone far and beyond for the safety of others. It was a risky move he had pulled turning into the bloodsucker, and he wasn't sure he could have done such a selfless act himself. May vampires aren't as bad as you say, Quinn said to the system. The boy I'm not worried about, the system replied. Just like with humans, not every human is bad, but right now the situation you are in is. This is because of those at the top, and sadly the same could be said for the vampires. Thankfully, Quinn was able to hide his identity using the costume and mask Logan had created for him. Also, Fex was unrecognizable as the bloodsucker. He had his uniform on, but in the fight with the king-tiered beast, it was badly damaged and had been rendered unrecognizable. The travelers looked like they were trying to help Vorden and Peter. Once Fex woke up, Quinn would go and try to meet up with them before they left the cave. But before all of that, there was still one thing he wanted to check out before leaving. The tower. There were a few reasons for this, and it was because of a few things the system had granted him after completing his last quest. Finally, with Fex sleeping away, Quinn had a chance to look at all the rewards other than the EXP and the blood ability increase he had received. With the blood skills increase, all his attacks related to blood skills had gotten stronger, but the most impressive of them was the blood bank. It now was able to store double the amount of blood at 200 milliliters. 10 ml of blood restored 5 HP, which meant if his blood bank was filled to the brim, it would allow Quinn to restore 100 points of HP. This was one of his most important skills, as it often gave him a second chance during fights. Quest reward. Unlock one ability skill. When looking at this, it seemed to be related to the shadow ability skill. Regardless of cost, Quinn was now able to unlock any of his remaining shadow skills. There were 5 skills still grayed out and unable to be selected. But one of these skills costs a total of 50 skill points to unlock, named Shadow Eater. With only 30 skill points, he was unable to unlock the skill before, but now he could. Our new skill, Shadow Eater, unlocked. He would look at the details of the skill later. With every new skill, Quinn needed to master it first before using it in a fight. Now wasn't the time, and there were a few more notifications the system had given him. He was a bit upset when he found out that he wasn't able to grab the king-tiered beast crystal. But in return, it seemed like the system had given him something else. Small blood crystal. 1. Obtained. That is a very rare item. Although you have no use for it now, I suggest you store it in your system for safekeeping. The system said, refusing to expand on any details. But hearing the system say such a thing was precious still placed a smile on Quinn's face. The last 2 notifications were the strangest, as they were T rewards for completing the quest. Instead, there were new quests altogether. A quest. Reach level 20 for next evolution. A reward. Next evolution Vampire Noble. Additional rewards will be revealed once rank has been reached. Quinn had suspected that the next stage of his evolution process would be when he reached level 20, and the system seemed to have confirmed it. It seemed to have appeared now due to the fact that Quinn was very close to achieving that level, now being level 18. When asking about Fex, he seemed to remember the system saying Fex was somewhere between a vampire and a vampire noble. Not quite at the next stage yet. Did this mean that he was now stronger, or just as strong as Fex? It was clear that there were some differences in terms of certain skills and abilities, but Quinn didn't believe his shadow ability was any weaker than Fex's string ability. Finally, the last notification. Quest Part 1/2. The king has been defeated and now the tower is left unprotected. Search the tower and discover what treasure it was trying to protect. Suddenly, groaning sounds rang out from behind. It looked like Fex was starting to wake up. What the hell happened? Fex said, looking around at where he was. He then looked down and noticed the flask on the floor. Images of when he was the bloodsucker started to appear in his head, and he remembered everything that happened. You saved me. Fex said, come on, I can explain while we're making our way over, Quinn replied. Over way. To the tower. The group of travelers had regrouped and were heading towards the students. Lily had been watching the fight carefully and wanted to join in, but she knew her duty was to stay by the students' side, in case anything happened. There weren't many strong creatures in the underground tunnels, other than the hounds and the king-tier beast. They hadn't run into anything else down here. Still, that didn't mean there was nothing. Also, the group was unaware of just how strong these students they were protecting really were. As she saw the 2 twins walking over still groggy, she rushed over to their side. Are you both all right? I saw what happened. Just who was that guy? She asked as she gave a shoulder to one of the bald-headed twins. That's what we want to know as well. Andre replied. You students, your uniform. I assume you are from one of the military bases out on an outing. Second year's right. Actually, we're first years. CIA replied, going over to the traveler's side. She still hadn't grown fond of the others, especially since PIO had tried to kill her not too long ago and she didn't know why, but she had the strangest feeling that he was looking at her in a weird way. Every so often her eyes would meet his. When this usually happened, one person would find the whole thing awkward and turn their head. But when it happened with her and PIO, he would continue to stare into her, as if he was picturing something. It gave her the shivers, and she was a lot more trusting of the new travelers. It's a good thing we came in time then. Andy replied. What are the military thinking sending in first years? Have the times really gotten that desperate? Well, if you look at the structures around us, perhaps. Andre said. I wanted to ask you guys, what happened? The king-tier beast on the ground. Did you see what happened to it, and do you know what that other creature was? And last of all, what about the strange demon-masked man? Peter, Vorden, and Layla wanted to keep their mouths shut. They were tired from the battle and worried if they were to explain things now, they might let something slip up. On the other hand, saying nothing would make them seem suspicious. The others looked in Vorden's direction. He was usually the best when it came to coming up with things. They all gave the nod, confirming he would be the one to come up with a story. But just as he was about to speak, CIA had chimed in. That King Tier beast, it was killed by. CIA had seen who had delivered the last blow. Although Fex was a strange creature that had mostly injured it, she had seen that it was actually Quinn who had killed it. It was killed by me. Another voice interrupted before CIA was able to finish a sentence. Logan, are you okay? Layla asked. I'll live. Logan replied. His wounds on the outside had healed up from the little robots, but his ribs still hurt a little as he breathed in. He then walked over to the travelers and lifted up, showing his wristwatch, revealing he was a level 8. It took everything I had with the help of my friends here, but we were finally able to kill the King Tier beast. Right after, that strange creature had appeared and had taken me out of the fight, leaving the others to fight for themselves. As for the strange person who appeared at the end, your guess is as good as ours. He only appeared when you guys saw him as well. Andre started to think about Logan's words. They were convincing, and the power level on his watch was even more convincing. But what had convinced him more than anything was the stone round circular contraption that was on top of his hands. He noticed straight away that they were used to create energy weapons. With the use of an energy weapon, what Logan had said would be quite achievable, especially as a level 8 ability user. Also, it was hard to imagine why the students would even lie in this type of situation, when they had seen firsthand the creature trying to kill them. On the other hand, there was also CIA. She didn't know who the masked man was while the others did, but what she did know was Fex was the one who had turned into a monster, and Quinn was nowhere to be seen after killing the King Tier. She wasn't completely stupid. Quinn had been using the red aura attacks, and the masked man had done the same. Most likely Quinn was trying to protect Fex. The question was, if Logan was lying and covering for them, it meant he also knew about all the secrets this group had and were hiding. Should I tell the travelers the truth? CIA thought. It was a hard one for her, but in the end, after looking at Logan, she decided not to. It was her way of returning the favor. Not only had she actually been saved by Quinn, but also she had been saved by Logan earlier, but with this, they were even. If anything else came up, she wouldn't hesitate to tell the others, but for now she would keep the secret. Okay, I've decided then, Andre said. Let's take them back to the shelter. Their teachers must be worried about them. But what about the tower? Andy replied. The tower can wait. It will still be here after we return the students. Besides, I feel like we have made a mistake in not informing the military in what was down here. Now the lives of students and perhaps others have been harmed when we could have prevented it. Andy looked annoyed. They had been fighting for days, trying to defeat the King Tier beast and finding out just what was down here. If it was some unknown powerful Dalki technology and the military got their hands on something powerful, it could ruin the balance of the leaders' table. When looking at the injured students, he felt like Andre was right. His leader was always right, even if he was sometimes too kind. The students and the group of travelers started to head out of the small town. While doing so, Vorden and Layla would constantly look around, hoping to find Quinn and Fex coming out at some point, but after several minutes of walking, they were nowhere to be seen. I hope you bring me a nice souvenir to work on from that tower, Quinn. Logan thought. He didn't think Quinn was dead. Something was telling him that Quinn was also interested in the strange tower, and he hoped Quinn would discover its secrets and bring back something for him to work on. While Logan was deep in the thought, he felt a slight nudge to his side. Logan, I don't think I can hold it in for much longer, Peter said, as he held his hand on his stomach. What? If you want to go to the toilet, just go. It's too dark here anyway. Nobody will see anything. Logan replied. No, it's not that. Hearing those words, Logan knew straight away what Peter meant. He was hungry. Before heading off to the tower, Quinn made sure of two things. The first thing was that his MC points were fully restored. Fex had been out for a while, so they only needed to wait a little longer before starting their journey again. The second thing was that he was fully equipped with all his equipment. Of course, that included his suit, which was made by Logan. He wore this as normal, all apart from the head part, only allowing his eyes to come through. The suit was easily adjustable, and at any time, Quinn could quickly lift up the hood to cover the top part of his head quickly. And that's why it wasn't a problem for him if he wanted to hide his identity from others. The reason for him doing this was because he no longer had his blood bank, his second chance. In all of his fights so far, he had always relied on the blood bank to help him in his time of need. There was no more blood in the flask. Fex had consumed all of it, and in doing so, it looked like his wounds were healing too. The armor that Logan created gave him some additional defense. Although it wasn't much, every little increment would help, and this was his reason for putting it on. They were about to head to the tower, and if the guard outside was that strong, Quinn feared that perhaps there was an even stronger guard inside. If that was the case, he wouldn't even bother fighting and abandon the quest. No matter how curious he was, or how good the reward for the quest was, it wasn't worth his life. "Are you all ready, then?" Quinn asked Fex. While they were waiting for both Fex's wounds to heal and Quinn's MC points to return, Fex was troubled in his thoughts. This whole time, he was thinking about Quinn. "Quinn, wait," Fex said as he rushed over and bowed down on one knee with his fist on the floor. "Well, what's this all about?" Quinn asked, shocked by Fex's actions. "I have to do this, please. Quinn, you saved my life. I remember everything that happened while I was the bloodsucker. When those travelers came and found me, you were already safe. The king tier beast was dead and the only thing that was trying to kill you all was me. I knew it was a risk turning into that thing, but it was the only thing I could think of at the time. When you saw that I was hurt and you were all safe, you risked your life. You fought against those travelers and risked me chasing after you. Finally, you used the flask that I had given you to save me." After saying these words, Fex punched the ground in anger. Quinn didn't quite understand this action, but he was sure it was because he was angry at himself. This whole time, he had been getting closer to Quinn for one reason, to save his own behind. If he was ever to be found out by his own clan, then Fex's idea was to turn Quinn in as one of the shadow users. With this information that he had brought to the leader, his father, the punishment he would receive for running to the human world without permission would be light. While Quinn, he had never thought about abandoning him. He had even risked his life going against a group that was able to outmatch him even as a bloodsucker. Fex no longer cared about how he was able to do it, or why he seemed to keep growing stronger. He just had this feeling of guilt over his heart that he wanted to get rid of. "I know I said this before, but seriously, if there is anything you need help with, don't hesitate to ask. I'm on your side, Quinn." Quinn didn't know what to say. These actions seemed out of the blue to him. Someone who was never serious since the day he had met him was suddenly being very serious. At the time, Quinn had only done what he felt was right. Fex had risked his life to save the whole group. What right did he have to die by the hand of strangers? Still, seeing him like this, Quinn didn't know why, but he naturally walked over to Fex and extended his hand. Fex, in return, naturally took it and lifted himself up. "We're blood brothers from now on," Fex said with a smile. "We may not be related by blood, but I will treat you just as if you were a part of my family." "And I will do the same," Quinn said with a smile. The two of them then headed off for the tower, and while on their way, they were both cautious with their footsteps. Then again, Quinn was a little less worried than Fex seemed to be. Judging by the text of the quest from earlier and the information it had given him, the quest indicated that the strongest beast outside of the tower was King Tyr. If the information was correct, it meant that there was nothing else outside of the tower that was stronger than the king beast. Still, that also meant there was the possibility of them running into advanced or intermediate tier beasts. Although they would be able to do something since they're together, with no blood and no humans around, it would be risky going into battle after battle. After slowly creeping their way towards the tower, by going through buildings, rather than go down the open street towards the tower, it seemed like they hadn't seen a single beast on their way there. This included the hounds they had first seen when they arrived. Is it the strange crystals from the top of the tower, or did the other beast just stay away from this place because of the King Tyr beast? Quinn thought. Finally, they had arrived at the location of the tower. The street that led to it finally ended, and there was now a large empty ring of space surrounding before the tower. The circle had several paths leading off towards other streets surrounded with buildings, but nothing apart from the tower stood alone in the center. The crystal shone brightly at the top and gave off a slightly blue hue to the area below it. When looking at the houses in each other's faces, it looked quite beautiful and peaceful, Quinn thought. He could see some pluses of living in a place like this, despite it being away from the sunlight. Maybe I am becoming more like a vampire if I think a place like this is nice to live, he thought. We can take out some time exploring if you're worried, Feck said as he saw Quinn admiring the tower. What do you mean? Quinn replied, I just thought you might be worried. The others would leave with those travelers. More than likely, they already know of an exit. I asked my little Ham to follow them from above. Once he knows where the exit is, he'll come and find me. Ham, is that the little flying bull from earlier? Quinn was quite interested in the companion, wondering if he was able to get something like that himself. Yeah, good name, right. Ignoring Fex's last words, Quinn continued to walk up to the tower. There was a single large double door with an arched entrance. The door was engraved with strange patterns, all of which Quinn had seen in images before when learning about the Dalki architecture. But right now, he wasn't too sure if it was Dalki-related or vampire-related. On the door in the center was a circular hole that seemed to go a few inches deep. It's a lock, Fex said. These doors, I've seen them in my own castle before. They are impossible to open without some type of key or mechanism. Also, don't even think about trying to break it. Trust me, they are meant to even withstand attacks from the vampire leaders. Doesn't that mean that there really is something important behind here? Quinn asked. Yeah, but I don't know what, Fex replied. Going up to the door, Quinn decided to try and give it a push using all his strength. He was half expecting it to do something, but just like Fex had informed him, it wasn't budging at all. It was hard to imagine while watching Quinn trying his hardest to push the door open that he had some type of super strength. I told you it was pointless, man. I hate to say it, but perhaps this was a wasted trip after all. Let's just rest somewhere nearby and wait for Ham, and then we can get out of here, Feck shouted. Just as Quinn was about to agree and head off, the system had something to say. Don't give up yet, the system said. Do you remember that red blood crystal you received from defeating the King Tier Beast? Why don't you place that on the door and see what happens? The system seemed to know more about this place than it was letting on. Doing as the system said, Quinn took out the red blood crystal from his inventory and placed it in the strange hole inside the door. Fex, who was seeing this, was wondering just what he was doing, but a few moments later, the sound of mechanical locks from behind the door being unlocked were made. Gears started to shift and the doors started to pull inwards, opening up a way inside the tower. Are you coming? Quinn asked. Up in the air, hovering far above while looking down at the fairly large town, was Ham. It was slowly following the group of students, along with the travelers seeing just where they were heading. It was high enough in the sky, so the light source on their beast gear was unable to reach Ham. Then again, with his eyesight, he was able to see them quite well in the dark anyway. I hope Master's okay, Ham said as he sniffled and allowed the large snot from his nose to lift up. He had been crying nearly the whole time, thinking about the possibility of Fex leaving him. He sniffed one time, hoping to bring the snot back up from his nose. However, while doing so, he did it just a little too late, allowing a droplet to fall from above. Asterisk splat. A small drop of liquid was felt on one of the bald twins' head. Is it raining in here? He said as he wiped the wet mark from his head. You idiot. We underground. Of course, it isn't raining. There's probably a river above or condensation or something, the other twin said. As the group was walking, Logan and Peter made sure to stay at the back. However, Lily continued to stay behind the entire group as a type of guard, just in case anything would appear. Now, Peter's pace was starting to slow a little as he was being more affected by his hunger. Peter, how long can you hold out? Until we get outside, I might be able to do something by then, Logan whispered. Peter immediately looked up at Logan from his bent-down position. He didn't say anything. Instead, his eyes were starting to show a slight tint of red in them. Okay, looks like you won't last that long. Looking around, Logan was trying to rack his brain at every option possible. Finally, The group had reached one of the tunnels that led out of the city from the streets. While looking at all the tunnels around them, Logan thought the place resembled an ant's nest with the many branching tunnels in the end, all leading to one destination. While walking through the tunnels, Logan had come up with an idea that perhaps would enable Peter to feed away from everyone. But before executing the idea, he needed to get some information. "So with all these tunnels, how do you guys know the way out?" Logan asked. "These tunnels are like a maze, and they either seem to loop to each other, or all end up going back to the original town we just left from," Andy replied. "In the end, we never found an exit, so we decided to create our own. One of the tunnels we marked ourselves. When we noticed the blue crystal lights, we placed red lights by the tunnel we created ourselves that led up to the surface." With the answer on how to leave the place, Logan could now execute his plan. The other students, including Logan, had actually come down the tunnels via the strange plant-like beast. Logan had scanned the place before coming down, so he knew there was a space between the surface and the ground they were currently on and was prepared for it. But even Peter had broken his legs when dropping from such a height, and he had a stronger structure than a regular human. It was a sad thought, but some of the other students were consumed by the strange plant-like beast. A few of them were most likely unable to make it and had fallen to their death. Unless they had an ability that could save them, this would be the case. All Logan needed to do was to make them split up with the others and search through the tunnels for one of these dead students that Peter could feed on. It wouldn't be too strange if the teachers found a student's corpse half-eaten. Beasts would do these type of things all the time. Finally, the group had exited from the tunnel and entered another larger section with several more tunnels. The second they entered the room, though, Peter loudly screamed as if he was in pain. It seemed too sudden. By Logan's predictions, they should have had more time. Looking around the room, though, he had soon spotted the cause. His theory was right. Some students really had fallen to their death after being consumed by the plant because there was a couple of students in front of them, their bodies mangled on the ground. The smell and sight of the students had caused a reaction inside of him. If he hadn't seen them, then perhaps they really would have had more time. Not knowing what to do, Logan rushed towards Peter with his suit still on and picked him up from the ground. If it wasn't for the suit he was wearing, Logan wouldn't have been able to even pick up Peter due to the size difference. While lifting him and placing him above his shoulder, Peter remained motionless in the same position, not even moving his hands but continued to groan. Right now, he was using every bit of energy and was concentrating on not lashing out and going towards the students. But even more so, he didn't want to bite his friend Logan, who was carrying him right now. Logan continued to run with Peter on his shoulder, picking a tunnel at random. "Wait, what are you doing?" Lily shouted, concerned for them. The others had already gone over to inspect the other students to see if they were still alive and anything they could do. However, it was too late. Unaware of the commotion going on behind them, they only realized something was happening when Lily had shouted out to them. "Wait!" Lily shouted out again, genuinely concerned for the two, so she decided to chase after them. Suddenly, Logan's hand had transformed into one of his blasters. He aimed it at the ceiling and blasted it away, causing the tunnel to crumble down, blocking the path between them. It wouldn't stop them, especially with their powers, but Logan wasn't hoping for that. He had analyzed their leader Andre, and he was quite a smart man. Hopefully, him seeing Logan do these actions would suggest that something was up, knowing they didn't want to be followed. With his cautious nature, he would suggest for them to first go back and hand over the students before returning, and Logan was right. "We should go after them," Lily suggested. She was genuinely concerned for the students' safety, especially since she was the only one that heard one of the students make a strange noise before everything had happened, and she couldn't help but wonder if they were related. "No," Andre replied. "Couldn't you see it? The other student caused the tunnel to collapse on purpose. They wanted to split up for us for whatever reason. For now, it's best if we leave that mystery unsolved and head back to the base. The students must be scared out of their minds after seeing what they have seen today." The group continued to walk through the tunnels, while also instructing the students to look away from the dead bodies. CIA tried to stay strong but continued to put her hand over her mouth and eyes as she caught glimpses of the bodies. But the others walked past them with more ease than her. Andre, seeing this, made a mental note. It was as if Vorden and Layla had seen death before. The normal reaction to such a thing would be similar to what CIA had done. Why do you think they ran off? Layla asked Vorden. If I was to guess, it would have something to do with Peter again. Logan wouldn't put his neck out on the line like that for no reason. Do you think Logan will be okay again? What if Peter's gotten hungry again and tries to eat Logan? Vorden couldn't help but chuckle at Layla's suggestion. Impossible. Trust me. By now, you should have been able to tell. Logan is not the one to worry about if the two of them got into a fight. It's Peter. Although that might have been the case before. Logan had used up several of his trump cards in the fight against the King-tier beast. He was also slightly injured from the battle. And lastly, Quinn had grown stronger from the fight, which meant Peter had too. Excitement started to enter through not only Quinn's body, but Fex's as well. They both continued to watch the double doors open inward slowly. Throughout Fex's life, he had seen these doors placed not only in his castle, but the other vampire leaders' castles as well. Every time Fex would ask about what was behind these doors, they would tell him it was none of his business. This, of course, just made Fex want to know more about what was behind the doors, but everything he did, he could never find a way to open one of them and eventually gave up. Once the doors had finished opening, at the same time, several torches from inside the tower started to light up, one by one as if it was leading and showing the two where to go. Come on, we have got to check this out, Fex said, already leading the way and walking forward onto the lit-up path. Quinn still possessed the blood crystal in his hand. When inserting it into the door, it only required him to place it. He found even after taking it out, the doors still remained open. This was good, for he was hoping that he might be able to use the crystal for something else. To make a weapon or something in the future. Placing it back into his system, he quickly followed after Fex, who was already quite away now. After a single step into the tower, the system had popped up with another message. You have entered a vampire tomb. Quest: explore the tower is now in progress. A vampire tomb? As in a dead vampire's grave. Quinn thought. System, did you know what this was? I had my guesses, but I couldn't be so sure, the system replied. Remember, in my time, the only place we called home was Earth. I did not know about places outside of Earth. There are two things I should warn you about before you proceed. First, a vampire tomb doesn't necessarily mean a vampire is dead. A vampire can choose to go into eternal slumber, which is similar to death but not the same. If they are one of quite high position or of importance to people, one of these towers will be created for them. Eternal slumber means a vampire has chosen to go to sleep forever themselves. It's a permanent state, and there's only one way to be woken up from it. By consuming blood from someone of the same family. They do not need to be related by blood, but only contain the same blood. An example of this is if you were to go into eternal slumber, then Peter would be able to wake you up with his own blood, as he is a part of your family, but Fex's blood would be useless. Are they usually guards in these types of places? Quinn asked, still worried they might encounter something. Usually I would say not. Could you imagine asking someone to look over such a place, and for how long? They could be in the tower for a very long if so. I would be bored out of my mind staying in such a dull place. My guess is two things. Either the vampire was a powerful one and his magic was so great he was able to convince the king-tier beast to act as a god. In order to keep it under its control for so long, it handed the blood crystal which you obtained after defeating the beast. My second guess would be after the beast found the blood crystal, it was compelled to this area. Something was telling it there was something powerful inside and it didn't know how to use it. At the same time, it couldn't leave this place due to its curiosity of power. Both things sounded possible. What Quinn didn't want it to be was some ancient powerful vampire that had decided to go to sleep on another planet somewhere. At least there was no chance for Quinn to wake it up. He was human, and he was his own family member. His blood couldn't be used to wake up any vampire. With this, Quinn decided to carry on forward. If this was a grave, then maybe just like pharaohs did of the past, they would bury themselves with their treasures. Excited by this prospect, he started to jog after Fex, who had gone quite a way ahead. After they both followed the torches down the path, it eventually led them to a large staircase leading upward. If these stairs lead all the way to the top, then it's going to be a painful walk all the way up. Fex said. They had no choice and started their climb. It wasn't as hard as Quinn initially thought. The stays were many, and if it was Quinn before he had turned into a vampire, he would have had to take several breaks. The two of them powered through the many stays and didn't really feel tired. However, they did feel like the stays would go on forever and were wondering when they would end. Finally, the stays had leveled out onto a platform and another large door could be seen. It was the same size as the one at the entrance, only this one didn't have a strange lock-like mechanism. Up ahead, after the platform, were even more stays leading up, suggesting they hadn't reached the top yet. Maybe we should check it out before we continue going upward, Quinn suggested. Wouldn't want to miss out on anything. Agreed, Fex replied. With a strong push, the doors opened. They were heavy, but with the two of them they were able to swing the door open, just like when they opened the door below. Torches around the room suddenly lit up. Instead of lighting up a path, this time, the whole room was lit up. It was a fairly large square room, but at the same time it was nearly completely bare. There was nothing inside the room apart from 5 podiums in the center of the room. Each podium had an item on them. There were pieces of armor, a chest piece, a leg piece, an arm piece, and a helmet. Lastly, on the final podium was a ring. The armor had a strange medieval design to it, and didn't look like any of the beast gear Quinn had ever seen. It looked almost like knightly armor, only with points and such at the end, while red in color. If dragons existed, this is what Quinn would imagine armor being made from a red dragon would look like. I can't believe it, Fex said. This is really ancient old vampire combat armor. I've only seen these things in books. Not even our castle has a set like this. Fex slowly walked over to the items, afraid that there might be traps around the room. While heading over to the podium, he carefully placed each foot, but found no such thing. The first podium he arrived at wasn't any of the pieces of armor. Instead, it was the ring. This looks like the one I'm wearing, but slightly different. Maybe you can wear this, Fex said as he picked up the ring of the podium. In an instant, the room felt like it was starting to shake. What did you do? Quinn complained. Nothing. I just picked up the ring. I was sure there were no traps. When Fex finished saying those words, a strange circular cylinder-like shape lifted up from the podium and covered each of the items. The cylinder went all the way up to the ceiling of the room they were in. Once the cylinders were formed, the vibrations had stopped, and it didn't seem like anything else was going to happen. Looking at the strange metal cylinder, Fex gave it a knock a few times. Damn it, there's no way we can get that equipment now. This material is the same thing the door down below is made from. Seeing what had just happened, Quinn could only assume the other items were locked away once Fex had picked up the ring. Perhaps the same thing would have happened after touching any of the items. Maybe the vampire who slept here was giving them a choice, a reward for discovering the place. But rather than give them everything, he gifted them a single piece of his treasure. Hey, Fex said as he threw the ring over to Quinn. He caught the ring in the air and took a look at it. It's yours, Fex said. I already have one, and I feel like an idiot for touching the ring before making sure everything was okay. If we were only allowed to take one item, then I might have just picked the sukiest out of them all. Inspect. A king tier blocking ring. When used on a vampire, it will completely block the effects of sunlight, as long as the ring is worn. Seeing the description of the ring, Quinn realized Fex must have made a mistake thinking the ring was the same because it wasn't. Fex's ring was an advanced level ring that was able to block out the sunlight for 3 hours at a time, and he would have to go back inside to allow it to recharge. But this ring had no such effect. It would allow Quinn to stay in the sun without getting any of the bad side effects as long as it was worn. There was no time limit. With this ring, the one weakness Quinn possessed had disappeared. A huge smile went over his face as he quickly placed the ring on. I wonder what else is in this tower, he thought. Turning his head back and looking down the tunnel from where they had come from, Logan could see that the others had chosen not to follow him. His plan that he made with his quick thinking had obviously worked. Even with Peter on his shoulder, he never slowed down. He continued to run down the tunnel until they had eventually reached an open space that had a lot of different paths and tunnels for them to choose from. It was similar to one of the areas where they just came from. The only difference with this open space was that there weren't any dead students littered about. Let go of me!" Peter shouted with his eyes now fully red, glowing in the dark. His mouth opened wide, revealing his teeth, which had grown sharper and larger. Feeling the weight on his shoulders shifting about, Logan could tell that something was up and immediately threw Peter off his shoulder and slammed him onto the ground. The impact was rough, as Logan didn't manage to hold himself back. This was because he could feel the strength of Peter, and he knew that he couldn't hold back any of his power. If the two were to get into a scuffle over strength, Logan was sure he wouldn't win. Lifting his head from the ground, Peter managed to get a glimpse of Logan, who now had his blaster held out, pointing it towards him. In return, Peter gave out a type of snarl and deep angry growl. "You're still in there, right, Peter?" said Logan. Hearing his own name coming out of Logan's mouth seemed to have calmed him down a little. But Peter suddenly started to seize. His body furiously shook as he trashed around on the floor. While doing so, the glow in his eyes seemed to have significantly dimmed. Seeing Peter hurt himself like this, Logan couldn't help but feel sad. It was clear that Peter didn't enjoy this and didn't want to eat him. Instead, he was desperately fighting that primal urge. He was starting to wonder if he had made a mistake and should have allowed Peter to eat that girl they had first met. Looking for some kind of a solution, Logan picked out and held out his altered hand scanner. He had made his own personal alterations to the scanner given by the school. The one he had was able to cover a wider range, and it was what led him to find the underground town in the first place. If it just worked, then he would be able to scan the tunnels and find out where the other deceased students were located. Instead of walking through blindly and playing their chances, they would at least have some benchmark as to where they should go. But for some reason, ever since coming down underground, the scanner was useless. "Why won't you work?" Logan said, and Peter was now standing in front of him with his head facing down towards the ground. It was unknown whether he had recovered his sanity or if he was already taken over by his hunger and primal urge. Meanwhile, on the other side, after Quinn and Fex realized that there was nothing the two of them could do to retrieve their items, they decided to cut their losses and leave the room. They had tried attacking the strange cylinder and even tried to dig underneath the ground. However, the black substance that made up the whole tower was also incredibly strong, just as strong as Gathram. It would take nearly their entire strength just to break apart small pieces of the tower, and understandably, it would take them a few days to make the slightest progress. If one day they discovered a way to easily break the metal cylinder or the black substance that surrounded the tower, then he could always return and grab the pieces of armor. As they left the room, they continued to ascend the stairs upwards, and at the same time Fex couldn't stop apologizing to Quinn for being rash and picking up the ring, which caused them to lose their chances of retrieving the other items. He was actually unaware of how much of a good mood Quinn was in right now for receiving the ring. He no longer would have to look strange carrying an umbrella around with him beneath the scorching sun. Also, when fighting, he no longer needed to rely on the suit. But of course, Quinn was happy he had the suit. Now, it was being used more on when he wanted to fight, using it and hiding his abilities, rather than a device to block out the sun. Finally, after a long walk up, they had reached a platform. It was the final platform, as they also noticed the ceiling above. The ceiling also had several pieces of the blue crystals sticking from underneath. When seeing the crystals, Quinn's greed wanted him to take all the crystals and sell them when he got back, but it would have been difficult anyway, unless he could fly to reach and pull out the crystals. It would also waste an incredible amount of time for him. On the final platform was another large, arch-shaped double door like the one before. It also had no lock, and all the two needed to do was push it open with their two hands. Just like every room they had entered before, the lights started to light up one by one, revealing what the room looked like. From the door to the center room was a large red carpet. It reached the center where there was a very large circle on the ground. The pattern on the circle was similar to that on the door they had first seen. Only there didn't seem to be anywhere for the blood crystal to be put in. Past this was more red carpet on the other end of the circle, which continued forward until it eventually reached a large chair. Who the hell was this vampire? Fex said. It seems like he might have had a little of an ego. Did he think he was a king or something? There was only one vampire king or queen, so Fex found it strange that a vampire, that perhaps a remainder from the 13 families or was stationed here would create such a room. When looking at the large chair or throne, it looked like only a person of significance would be allowed to sit on such a place. That was when Quinn spotted something while looking at the throne. Everything in the room was a disappointment so far, since there seemed to be nothing there of use. But just behind the chair, a little bit above behind it, looked like a clear glass pane, and inside was a large sword-like weapon. The sword didn't look regular, for even though it was locked away behind a glass casing, it seemed to have several black chains wrapped around it, from the hilt all the way up to the tip of the blade. Why would a sword need to be chained up when it isn't being held by anyone? Fex too had seen the sword and started to rush forward excitedly. After a few steps, he stopped himself as he was reminded about what had happened in the room before. "Quinn, how about you go for this one?" he said, smiling nervously. Quinn did just that and walked straight past the throne chair and continued to the glass encasement. While looking at the blade closer, he could tell it was a beast blade rather than just a regular sword. The handguard seemed to be quite scaly and rocky, red in color and pattern, which matched the armor seen earlier. Between the handguard and the bladed part was a red gem. It looked very similar to the crystal that Quinn had obtained after defeating the king-tier beast. From the crystal, inside the sword, a single red line ran up the blade until the tip. It looked like a bar of some sort, but both the crystal and the red line running up the sword seemed to be void of any power. Placing his clawed gauntlet fingertips on the glass pane covering it, he started to use all his strength, hoping to make a scratch or an indentation. Just like with all of the materials they had discovered before in the tower, it was almost unbreakable to him. "I was going to tell you, but I thought you got the gist by now," Fex said, seeing Quinn attempt to break the glass. After giving up on the idea of getting the sword, Quinn was about to search the room to see if there was anything he had missed. He took a step back, and once again, the room seemed to slightly vibrate. In front of the sword, a podium started to rise. It wasn't large, and it rose up until about waist height to where Quinn was standing. The vibration stopped in the room, and so did the podium. On top was a diamond-like shape hole. Quinn turned to look at Fex to see if he had any clue what was going on. "Don't look at me," Fex replied. "I've been long lost about this place ever since entering this tower." He was right. Quinn actually knew more about this tower than Fex, and that was only because the system had informed him that this was a vampire tomb. Still, Quinn had yet to see a casket. The tower didn't have many rooms. There was only the starting floor, the middle-level floor, and here the top floor. It was impossible for them to miss anything. So just where was the vampire being kept? Right now, though, Quinn was more concerned about the podium in front of him. As he gently ran his fingers over the top of the podium, another message appeared. "Would you like to insert your blood crystal? Once inserted, the blood crystal may not be removed." "Yes. No. If I select yes, will it allow me to obtain this sword?" While Quinn was in deep thought about the message he had just received, standing by his side, Fex was now starting to act a little strange. He had now had the time to properly analyze the weapon in front of him. "Have I seen something like this before?" Fex said out loud. Maybe the first leader had something like this. But if that's true, what the hell is something like that doing here? "You know what type of weapon this is then?" Quinn asked. "Maybe. Honestly, I'm not sure. I think I saw one of the other vampire families carry around something like this, but often the families kept secrets from each other. Everyone would hide their power, and then when the king relinquished their seat, that was the time when everyone revealed their cards. Maybe one of the other leaders knows something more about this weapon, but at least out of all the kids around my age, I have never seen anything like this." Quinn was hoping he could get more information about the weapon in front of him. It seemed pretty obvious that it wanted him to place the red blood crystal into the podium in front of him. Most likely that would lower down the barrier blocking the sword. The problem was the system had declared once the blood crystal was inserted, it would no longer be able to be removed like before. The AI voice before had said that the stone was a precious item. What exactly can a blood crystal be used for? Quinn asked the system in his head. "I suppose I should tell you. You will have a tough decision ahead of you." The system said. The blood crystal can be used just like a beast crystal. They are used to either create armor or weapons. For certain reasons, these crystals are a lot rarer than beast crystals. Are they stronger than beast weapons? Quinn asked as he was starting to get a little excited. It's hard to say honestly. The unique thing about a blood weapon is it has the ability to evolve and grow stronger. However, depending on the crystal used, there's a limit to its growth and also its starting point. What you have right now is your hand is the lowest tier of blood crystals. An evolving weapon didn't sound too bad to Quinn. While others might be put off wanting a straight-up powerful weapon, he didn't find it too troubling as it was similar to the situation he himself was already in. The idea of his weapon growing stronger while he did as well sounded nice. What put him off, though, was knowing that the crystal he held was the lowest type. He looked at the weapon behind the glass case once again, and it really was like nothing he had seen before. He didn't need to ask this as he was sure of the answer, but asked just in case. Is that a blood weapon? Yes, the system replied. How powerful it is from looks alone, I cannot say. Quinn had two choices, to hand in the crystal, or use it to create his own weapon. After thinking about it for a while, he had made his decision. There was another major problem if he was to keep the blood crystal, and that was finding someone to create a blood weapon for him. Someone he could trust to keep the secret and someone who knew how to forge with the crystals. Envisioning problems for the future, Quinn decided to hand in the crystal and take the sword instead. Our small blood crystal has been inserted. The room started to shake slightly once again, and the podium along with the crystal started to sink into the ground slowly. Eventually, the whole podium was back into the floor and the vibrations had stopped. Quest Explore the Tower complete. There was no reward for completing the quest, but he couldn't be upset about that for long as he felt like he was about to get the best reward for coming to this place. A large smile appeared on Quinn's face as he rubbed his hands together waiting to try out his new weapon. After standing there for a few moments, he quickly realized that nothing was happening. The glass covering the sword was still there. Hey, I think you just got scammed out of your crystal, Fex said, looking at Quinn by his side. His face dropped after hearing those words, as Quinn was starting to think the same thing. He started to bang on the glass frame, pounding his fist against it. Hey, give me the sword. I gave you what you want, now it's my turn. But there was no reply and the room continued to remain stagnant. Did it really do nothing? Did I just lose my chance to create something great? After saying those words, Quinn released something that was different. The whole energy and the place around them had changed. Somewhere else, underground at the same time, Logan was steadily backing away, holding out his blaster at Peter. He hadn't made any moves yet, but he could see his body slowly breathing in and out, not moving a step from his position. While continuing to back away at a snail's pace, a sudden sound was heard. Asterisk ding, asterisk ding. The sound had indicated from around Logan's waist. Without having the need to look, he knew where it had come from. It was his scanner. Using one of his hands, he picked up the scanner and immediately turned it on. And just like he thought, it was a success. For some reason, the scanner had returned back online. After quickly scanning the tunnels around them, Logan had found what he was looking for. In one of the tunnels to his right side, not too far from here, were the bodies of some students who had met an unfortunate end after falling down from above. Yes, Peter, I think I can solve your problem. In Logan's excitement, he had placed both eyes on the scan only for a brief second. Now when he locked up, Peter was no longer standing where he was directly in front of him. Back in the strange tower, Quinn was starting to realize what the change was that he was feeling. After inserting the blood crystal into the podium, it seemed like whatever was blocking out his senses before was no longer there. He could now clearly sense Peter. With this, shock had entered his heart. Sensing Peter now, he could feel a mix of emotions and feelings rush over his mind and body. Damn it, is this because of the fight from before? Quinn said, we have to hurry and get back to the others. The tower had been fully explored, and it didn't look like Quinn was going to get his weapon. With Peter the way he was bound to be dangerous, so he had made the decision to leave the tower and Fex had no problem following. After the two exited from the tower and started to head out of the town, Fex turned around and looked at the tower one last time. Bye-bye, tower. I guess there was nothing that special in there after all. I wonder what is behind my family doors then as well. I hope it's not the same boring stuff we found here. When the blood crystal was inserted into the podium and went back into the floor, a process had begun. Slowly, strange mechanisms were at work behind the eyes of the two boys. The crystal was being heated to an incredible degree and was starting to be melted down. This process took some time, but when the right heat had been reached, a red blood liquid was formed and slowly starting to filter down. The liquid flowed in one direction, downward through a tube-like shape. It continued to go down until eventually it reached its destination. Like a sand timer, it started to drip down, and the sound of it hitting something could be heard. Once all of the blood liquid had dripped out, something started to change. In the top room tower, the large circular pattern on the floor started to shift. The outer ring moved to the right fist, while the inner ring moved to the left. The rings continued to move in different directions, each time with a clicking sound. With one click, the outer circle ring would stop. With another, the inner circle would stop. This continued until eventually it reached the large circle in the center. The center circle started to rise up from the floor, and it finally stopped when it reached a height a little larger than an average human. A few seconds later, and the metal circle cylinder dropped quickly back down into the ground, and left in its place was a human figure. It was a handsome male figure, with pale white skin and dark black hair, that seemed to go all the way down to the person's waist. The facial features were quite feminine, but what stood out most of all was the fact that he had no clothes on whatsoever, and he continued to stand in the room completely naked. Slowly his eyes opened and a red glow could be seen. "I wonder how long I've been asleep," the man said. He turned his head to look to see if there were others around, but he could see no one in the room. "I wonder who woke me up. That's a shame. I would have perhaps given him something as a reward." Holding out his hand with his hand open, he faced it towards the weapon behind the glass. The weapon started to vibrate slightly, and soon the vibrations grew stronger. A strange force compelled it towards the man, and the weapon smashed through the glass and into the man's hand. "Let's see if anything has changed in the outside world," the man said. Just a second ago, Peter was there right in front of Logan. It was only a brief moment, but after checking his scanner and allowing his eyes to gaze down, he looked back, and in front of him, no one was there. He had disappeared entirely. Seeing something so dangerous potentially be anywhere in the room with him was starting to make even Logan nervous. He no longer had any sticky light balls to shoot out, and his suit only produced enough light for him to be able to see a few meters in front of him. Peter could see as clear as day down here. They were unfavorable odds, and Logan started to curse himself, thinking about how he ever got himself in this type of situation. Before he nearly did anything, in the past, he always thought of the probability of something happening, the risk he would put himself in before taking action. If the odds seemed against him, he would never take the risk. But when seeing Peter writhing in pain and the others there, Logan had reacted on instinct, moving him out of the area. A sharp, sudden sound was heard to his right, and a blast was shot from his blaster in an instant. The explosion had only managed to hit the strange black material, which was as strong as always, causing no rubble or stone to break off, but leaving a peculiar smell from the blaster. "I don't want to hurt you, Peter. Suppose I hit you now before you've eaten anything. There's a good chance you can't heal," Logan said calmly. His voice was full of confidence, but inside his mind was starting to panic a little. Although Logan's reaction time wasn't beyond that of what a human being was capable of, he was still quite confident in his skills to hit something before it was able to move. Nearly all the students at the school, apart from those with either high-level beast gear or speed-related abilities, Logan was pretty confident he would be able to hit them with his blaster. But the attack he just fired right now, he couldn't even see Peter or even an afterimage. "I guess you really do suit an assassin, but it isn't the time to test it on me," Logan said. As he said those words, groans could be heard once again in a specific direction. When Logan looked at where they were coming from, he could see Peter knelt down on the floor holding his stomach. "Logan, just leave me. I don't think it's safe. Just go now," Peter shouted. Ever since Peter had evolved into a white, his whole demeanor and attitude had changed. The others thought the old Peter was completely gone, lost, but that wasn't true at all. Peter still had feelings, he still had worries, and inside he was still scared as always. There were times when these old feelings and demeanor would show more than others, and one of these times was when he spent time with Logan. He didn't know why, but the others seemed to treat the new Peter different compared to Logan. It felt like Logan didn't care what he was and never found it strange the way the new Peter acted. While with the others, he could always feel they felt different. Like the Peter they were talking to wasn't the same before. It hurt Peter inside, especially since he knew he was still the same person. One of these people who he could tell felt this way was Quinn, someone who he considered close. He could see every time Quinn looked at him, it was different from the way he looked at Peter before. It wasn't a bad way, but it was one of sadness. Will I never be good enough? Peter thought. He wasn't back then, and he wasn't now. The only person who he was good enough for was Logan, and even now Logan had tried to help him multiple times. If there was one person, he would do everything in his power to not to eat or hurt. It was Logan. For a moment, Peter was able to fight back his hunger, but in return, he could feel all the painful pangs in his body. As he looked up at where Logan was before, he could see he had already run off. Good. You listened, Peter said. He wasn't hurt this time. Seeing Logan run off to save himself, he had already done enough. The pain continued, and Peter honestly wondered if he was going to die. Although he could have let the hunger take over and his body run wild, he wanted to remain in control of his body for as long as possible. Then the sound of footsteps was heard, echoing through as if someone was running towards them through one of the tunnels. No. If it's another person, I'll attack them as soon as I see them, said Peter. Stay away. Turn back. Peter shouted down the tunnel. But the footsteps only grew louder as the person was getting closer. Then in the darkness, a strange, relatively large object was seen flying through the air coming towards him. While it was hard to see what it was, Peter knew. Or more to the point, his body knew as he leapt through the air and opened his jaw wide, grabbing the flying object with his mouth. He immediately started to rip it apart with his two front teeth and claws, pinning it to the floor. Out from the tunnel, Logan had appeared with a student on his back. He placed it on the floor and took a few steps back. I know this might be disrespectful, but you are already dead. I promise I will find out who your family are and treat them well. They will live a life of happiness due to your help for as long as I am alive. ********. The two boys continued to run through the town at breaking speed. On the way to the tower, they hadn't seen any high-level beasts. Quinn was now sure of it. There was nothing left underground that was stronger than the king-tier beast. With this thought in his head, he was able to freely run as fast as he could towards Peter. He was worried about what could happen, mostly since he was with the others, and worried about what would happen if the travelers were to find out and get involved. Following closely behind, Fex was struggling to keep up. I was right. He really has grown stronger and at a crazy pace. He's a lot faster than me, and I can barely keep up anymore. But how? Nothing I can think of can make sense anymore. If I want to find out the truth, there's only one thing I can do. Ask. This time, though, I won't ask for someone else. Fex was always hesitant to ask Quinn this question, and before he didn't know why, but now he did. It was because he felt guilty. When thinking about asking the question, in the back of his head, he knew he had an ulterior motive, as if he was trying to find out some secret information to bring back to his family. Now, he no longer cared and had decided no matter what, he wouldn't reveal to anyone about Quinn. Right now, he wanted to find out for himself, for his own curiosity. Once they were out of this place, Fex wanted to find out the secrets about Quinn. Suddenly, Quinn stopped in his tracks. He had completely slowed down and was no longer running at full speed. What's wrong? Fex asked. Truthfully, Fex was out of breath, but seeing Quinn was fine, he tried his best to hide he was tired. As soon as Quinn turned away, he would start panting. He still had his pride and didn't want to show he was now weaker than his friend. There were actually two reasons why Quinn had stopped. The first was Quinn felt that Peter was no longer hungry. The pain he was feeling up to this point had disappeared. Quinn found it hard to believe that Peter would have been able to eat someone in front of the travelers. He could tell they were strong. Thank you, Logan, Quinn said under his breath. He didn't know why, but he had a hunch if anyone could solve the problem, it would have been him. The second reason for stopping was because Quinn could sense and smell a familiar presence. It didn't take long, and soon Fex could smell who it was as well. You seem to always be in the most interesting, Quinn. I think I should start putting a track on you and just follow you around everywhere. Out from one of the buildings, a slightly older bald man came out with his trusty blade by his side. "Ah, it's the teacher," Fex said and pointed. "You should show some respect, young boy. Right now, I'm more than just your teacher, but your commanding officer," Leo said. "But I'm happy you're safe. I'm here to search for the remaining students. Your friends who were with you have already been escorted outside to the surface. They returned to the shelter with the rest of the students, and they informed me of this place." Just then, Leo stopped mid-sentence. It was strange, and the other two were wondering what happened. Not only had he stopped mid-sentence, but Leo was utterly frozen. It was as if he wasn't even breathing anymore. "Quickly!" Leo shouted. "We must get out of here and run." "What's wrong?" Quinn asked, genuinely concerned. His teacher had always been so composed. Even when going up against the Dalki, he never once ran away. But Quinn was sure of it. Leo had said we, which included himself. "There's something down here. Something incredibly powerful. I can sense its aura. We have to leave now." Something powerful, Quinn thought. They had already killed the king-tier beast, so Leo couldn't be talking about that, and while exploring the whole place they had found nothing and Quinn was unable to sense nothing. So just what was this powerful being or thing Leo talking about? Leo didn't need to ask the students twice. They both quickly followed Leo closely behind as the three of them ran out of the town and into the tunnel, not once looking back. But his strange actions were starting to make Quinn think. It was a first for him, the first time he had ever seen his teacher running away from a confrontation. Up to this point in his eyes, his teacher had always been someone that seemed unreachable, a force too strong to even begin to imagine the real strength of. Even when facing the Dalki, he had never acted like this. Whatever it was that was frightening him or making him act like this, it had to be strong. But if something was that powerful down here, then why hadn't Quinn or the others come across it? After thinking about all the possibilities of what could have happened, one thing was stuck in his mind. No, it can't be. We looked around the whole tower. The tower they had just left was known as a vampire's tomb, and judging by the site of the building and what was left behind, it was a powerful one. Didn't you say a vampire would need the blood of one of its family members? It's impossible for it to wake up, right? Quinn asked the system, but it had chosen to remain silent. "Answer me." Quinn snapped in his mind. This time he was insistent and wanted an answer. "Sorry." The system replied. "I was just thinking about the possibilities, but perhaps there was a chance we really did wake it up." "But how?" Quinn replied. "The only thing I can think of is the blood crystal from before. Remember how I said a blood crystal was quite rare? Well, that's because a blood crystal is harvested from a vampire's body itself. Just like how the beasts contain a crystal inside their bodies, vampires do too. Creating weapons from these things became a taboo. It was a practice that quickly became outlawed. The blood crystals themselves weren't illegal, but intentionally harvesting one form of body was. Of course, we don't entirely know what is inside the blood crystal, but when using it as a raw material to create a weapon, the first part of the process is melting the crystal down. At just the right temperature, the crystal will start to melt and turn into a blood-like substance. I'm afraid there is a chance that when you inserted the crystal into the podium, it might have started that process and woken up whatever vampire was deep in its sleep. "Why didn't you say something earlier then?" Quinn complained. "I thought the same as you at the time, that the crystal would be used to help you get the weapon. You see, when a vampire goes into eternal slumber, it does so out of its own choice. In a way, it is a vampire saying it is done with the current world and is moving on. However, their bodies are usually kept at their family, base, or castle. This way, if they ever needed to call on those desperately in times of need, they could do. When I saw that there were no vampires in this area, or even any inside the tower, I assumed that the vampire must have chosen to pass on. Some tombs often set trials for their family members, with traps and tasks. Once these were completed, they would pass on their treasures to the next generation. I thought that this person was just doing the same." The three of them had finally left the town. They had gone through one of the tunnels into an open area with several different pathways. The look on Leo's face looked a lot better. Once he had traveled through the tunnel, He could no longer sense the straying force that well. This was because of his ability. It was strong, but he could only see the area he was in. As soon as he entered the town, his view had widened, and he could see anything. There was one thing that was troubling him greatly, though. The aura that he had sensed was the same color as both Quinn and Fex. Still, Leo didn't want to take any chances finding out whether this person was friendly or not. Just because they had the same aura as the two students didn't mean they were close. It was easy for Leo to select the path back, as he remembered well which direction he had entered from, and he started to lead the two students out. Finally, they were about to leave the strange city and everything that had been found behind. While traveling through the tunnel, it started to slightly tilt upward with no end in sight, and they were unsure how long it would take them to get out. While traveling together, Quinn was still trying to digest everything he had been told earlier about the blood crystals, and now he had a few strange questions on his mind. If a family member is unable to kill its own member, how would someone obtain a blood crystal in the first place? Quinn asked. That is an excellent question. Even though vampires and subspecies are unable to go against their creator, that still doesn't mean they are unable to break the rules. Just like with every family, they had their fair share of troublemakers. One could always ask another family to do the job for them, but it would leave a sour taste in the mouth and would often cause grudges between friends and such if this was to happen. As such a special group was created, one outside the 13 families. These were called the Punishers. Their duty was strictly to uphold the vampire laws that were created by the 13 vampire leaders and the king. They were separated from the others. They didn't make friends with any of the 13 and didn't interact with them other than to bring down harsh punishments. These Punishers, they must have been quite strong then, if they had to force these vampire families to follow the laws, Quinn said. Yes, very strong. When the system spoke these words, he seemed to drift off a little. Are they still around? Quinn asked, noticing the system acting strangely when speaking about them. Unfortunately, that is for you to find out at another time. Quinn had tried pressing further as he did before. If the system gave in once, maybe it could give in again and tell him more information, but he was unsuccessful. The vampire world seemed complicated and strange. It also seemed to have a very long history that he knew nothing about. The system tried to reassure Quinn that it was unlikely the blood crystal had woken up the vampire from its slumber. Some of the events just didn't make sense. Why hand over a blood crystal to a beast if they planned to wake up at a later time? Were they just leaving everything to chance? Although what the system had said seemed possible, Quinn had a strange feeling that they had woken up the vampire. He knew Leo wasn't acting that way for no reason. This time, rather than wanting to find out about it, Quinn just wanted to get away from this place as soon as possible. Finally, the end of the tunnel could be seen, and daylight was shining through. Both Quinn and Fex never thought they would be happy to see the sun, but they truly were. As they both stepped outside, they lifted their arms up, covering their eyes from the sensitivity, but also had a huge smile on their face. Quinn seemed even happier than Fex as he started to jump up and down on the spot. Are you that happy to be free? Leo asked, hearing the sound of Quinn jumping up and down. Embarrassed and a face flushed with red cheeks, Quinn replied, Yeah, it's just nice to see the sun again. The reason why Quinn was more overjoyed than usual was because for the first time in a while, when stepping into the sun, he didn't feel sick. He didn't feel groggy or weak, and there was no system message. The ring had worked, and now Quinn could live a life he once had without any restrictions. The two boys continued to follow Leo back through the jungle. There were many beasts still in the jungle, but thanks to Leo's ability, they were able to avoid all of them and select the safest path heading back to the shelter. Eventually, they had arrived where all the remaining students were. They were staying out the shelter in the large open space on the ground, getting taken care of by the other military staff. Quinn! Layla shouted as she got up and started running towards him. As soon as she reached him, she gave a big old bear hug, squeezing him tightly. I thought you might have died. I told you. You had nothing to worry about, Vorden said, walking closely behind Layla. As she let Quinn go, Vorden proceeded to give Quinn a fist bump and also a pat on the shoulder. Looking around, Quinn was also happy to see that everyone in their team was alive, and it looked like Peter was okay, When his eyes met up with Logan's, a big thumbs up was given in his direction. "We need to do something about Saya later," Vorden whispered as they both noticed she was continually looking in their group's direction, refusing to join them and staying close to the other students. "All right, everyone," a soldier shouted. "It's time to gather up. Your Sergeant Leo has an important announcement to make." All the students had gathered in the open field on the shelter. The rest of the soldiers carried on doing what they were doing, but they seemed to be busier than ever before. A lot more than when the students had first come here, as if they were in a rush for something. When looking around, there were many students who were no longer with them, that had either died from the strange plants and underneath in the underground tunnels, or from the advanced T-beast from before. The look on the students' faces were horrified, and some of them didn't even know how to feel. Stood at the front of them all was both Leo and Faye. Leo walked forward first. "Everyone listen carefully, for we have some important news to tell you all." A while before Fex and Quinn had arrived at the shelter, all the students from the other classes had been told to return to the shelter as well. This was an order issued by Faye. Frequently, both Faye and Leo were being called out to help the other groups. It was clear that this wasn't a green portal planet, or at least not one that the first-year students could handle. After Leo had gone after Dell's class and took longer than usual to return, Faye had decided to make the executive decision to call back all of the students to the shelter. The mission was an important one, and she knew her superiors wouldn't accept this as an excuse, especially after just one day. Instead, to minimize the risk, the plan was to go as one large group while both Faye and Leo would guide them, rather than split them up via their homeroom classes. They would cover less ground this way, and the expedition would be a lot slower, but it also would be safer this way. Some of the students, when returning, were annoyed. Sure, they had run into trouble now and again, but in the end, no students had died. Only the weak ones had been injured. They felt like it was better to get rid of the baggage they were carrying. Why not just allow the vulnerable students to return while the stronger ones continued to hunt? All the other classes had now returned apart from Dell's, and Faye was starting to worry. "Where are you, Leo? If it's something you can't even handle, then we really need to get off this place as soon as possible." "Hey, I see someone moving," a student shouted. A person had stepped through the jungle-like trees and were now standing on the open, dark soil of the shelter. The first person to arrive was Leo, and behind him, all of the students started to follow. As the other group saw Dell's group, sounds of gasps and words of concern were heard. "What happened to them? Do you think they ran into an advanced beast or something?" "Yeah, right. If they did, it would be a lot worse than this. You have to remember Dell's class is one of the weakest class out of them all." What the students said wasn't wrong. Dell's class was considered the weakest. With Erin gone and the only strong one left being Vorden, it was hard for them to place the class above any of the others. Vorden's ability would only allow him to copy the strongest of another class. In the students' eyes, that only made them even, and they still had plenty of other strong students in their classes apart from one person. Of course, they thought like this because they didn't know how Vorden's ability really worked. Soon, the students regretted saying those words as the others started to realize something. At first, they thought that Dell's class had just been more injured than theirs. If they had encountered intermediate beasts and it took Leo a long time to get there, then it would make sense. But a little while after, they noticed that no more students were coming out from the jungle. The current size of the class that appeared was a little less than half. "Where is everyone? What happened?" the students said, concerned. Not for the other missing students, but they were more worried that if something got to them, then they could be next. The students from Dell's class were taken in for further healing as well as to make an official report, while Faye and Leo were to discuss what was to happen next. "What happened to them?" Faye asked. "It looks like they went off trail due to an advanced T-beast," Leo explained. The look of horror appeared on Faye's face as her fears were confirmed. "Don't worry. I already dealt with it before even meeting up with the class." As for the remaining students, according to the teacher Dell, they were all eaten, and there was no chance the students survived. The two of them looked over at where Dell was. He was currently barging his way through the injured students and going to the front of the queue. "Out of the way. Don't you guys know how to respect your superiors and elders? It was only because of me you guys managed to live in the first place." and this is how you treat me. Although Leo couldn't really see Dell's actions, hearing his words made him feel sick. That man doesn't deserve to be a teacher, Leo said as he clenched his fist. This should be fun. Faye thought. She mainly knew Leo due to his feats during the war, but hadn't seen him in combat much. After hearing how easily he dealt with the Dalki, she knew the rumors had to be true. Any chance to watch someone so significant in combat was a good opportunity for her to learn, especially since she also primarily used a sword as her weapon. As Leo took another step forward, he suddenly stopped. Before anyone else, he could hear the sound of the leaves ruffling from behind. Looks like we finally made it, Andy said as he appeared out of the jungle. The group of travelers had arrived, but they weren't alone, for they had also brought back Vorden, CIA, Layla, Peter, and Logan. Inside the tunnels, Logan had managed to regroup quickly with the travelers once his scanner was working. As an excuse for why Logan had done his actions, he simply said that he was too afraid after seeing the students dead and thought that a beast was inside with them. Although Andre didn't quite buy it, he decided to let it slide. The students were the military's problem, not his. Looks like some more of Dell's class has arrived. Maybe they aren't dead after all and would just split up. Faye and Leo hadn't quite told the students what had happened to Dell's class. The students who had survived were still busy being interviewed and were away from the other students, so they still had yet to hear from the other students what happened. After the travelers and students had walked out from the trees and vines, what followed next started to cause alarm in the camp. For the large lion-like beast came out as well. Beast! Beast! Students shouted as they recognized the beast was a powerful-looking one, perhaps at the advanced level. Calm down. One of the commanders who was looking after the students shouted. That beast will do us no harm. It belongs to the Bree family. After hearing that name, the students quickly began to calm down. By hearing the name, they felt safe, as the Brees were one of the big fours and their powers were known quite wide. The ability to control beasts. Seeing the stripes on both Faye and Leo's side, Andre knew straight away who were the highest commanding officers in this shelter. He approached the two of them and saluted at them out of respect. Faye did the same back, but Leo had chosen not to do anything. Leo, I know you can't see, but this is someone from the Bree family, and they just saluted you, Faye whispered. Oh, I know, but one must earn respect. I do not know who this man is. I see no reason to show respect to someone just because they carry a certain name. Leo replied loudly, knowing that he could be heard. I agree wholeheartedly, Andre replied, which is why I chose to keep my name a secret from most. Unfortunately, my ability is a dead giveaway. Anyway, I believe these students are yours, Andre said as he opened up his palm, telling the students to go over to the other side. CIA had the biggest smile on her face as she ran forward towards the shelter and the other students, while the others decided to remain, hoping to hear the conversation between these two powerhouses. Thank you, Leo replied. Would you mind telling me where you found them? Perhaps I will be able to search for others near the same area. You have done enough, so there is no need for you to go out of your way, Leo said. Andre and Andy both looked at each other. They had suspected, bringing back the students, that something like this would happen. In the end, they had already made their decision when coming here. Actually, there is something we must inform you about, Andy said as he stepped forward and handed over his scanner to Faye. They revealed information that they had kept secret from the military. The fact that they had discovered an underground town. Not only that, but it seemed like it was made from Dalki structure. They made excuses while explaining, stating that they knew the place was abandoned and had been taken over by beasts, which is why they decided not to inform or trouble the military with this information just yet. But both Faye and Leo knew there must have been a deeper reason for doing something like this. Leo, both Quinn and Fex, they are still down there, Vorden said. Logan then handed over the altered scanner he had created to Faye as well, displaying the information he had found. Most of the students who were taken by the plants seem to have passed away. There is still a chance that there are others, but I'm sure both Quinn and Fex are still alive, Logan explained. Standing by Leo's side, slowly Faye was boiling up at what she had just heard from the travelers. You. I can't believe you are hiding this from us. Do you know if you had given this information to us beforehand, the The students would have never been sent to a planet like this in the first place. Because of you, students died. Before she even knew it, her fist was already flying towards Andy's face. At the same time, she felt a slash going towards her arm. Images of her arm being sliced off were seen. Quickly pulling it back, she looked at her hand and could see it was still intact. A vision. She said, "Don't be too rash," Leo said. But at the same time, he too had his hand on the hilt of his sword. Vorden and the others were prepared for a clash between the travelers and the sergeants. They were ready to help out Leo wherever they could. Other than helping them find an exit, the travelers hadn't really done much to help them. In the end, Quinn was the one who had killed the beast. Also, they still remembered how much in debt they were to Leo for saving them from the Dalki. Every one of the students from the sideline, including the other soldiers, silently watched from the sideline. They were too afraid to get involved. If they did, it could cause trouble due to the relations the one of the Big Four had with the military. The pressure emitting from the two groups was immense, that even one wrong word or act might make the already fearsome looming presence break out and swallow them whole. In the case for someone like Peter and Vorden, they were able to handle such a pressure that coiled. However, for Layla and even Logan, it felt like they were about to be consumed by the dangerous energy that was swirling around. It was only waiting to be unleashed. Are they really going to clash? The students on the side asked one another. Some of them began to get anxious of a fight breaking out. It would be silly if they did. Another student sneered, shaking their head. After all, this is such a small thing. No one would be willing to start a war between a few missing students. However, they were unaware of how Leo thought. He was a simple man. Rather than thinking about the bigger picture of what his actions would lead to, he thought it was best to do what was right in the current situation. As things came to him later, he would continue to deal with it. This was how he always was and continued to be. Right now, the people in front of him had put the students he was responsible for in danger. In the past, Leo was a different man, and he did think about things, perhaps thought about them too much, to the point where those around them suffered because of it. I won't let that happen again, Leo thought. Although the others thought Leo wouldn't do something, Vorden managed to catch a glimpse of Leo's thoughts. He could see his fingers twitching slightly as he held the hilt, is ready to attack at any moment. After sharing Leo's powers and interacting him with theory time he did with Quinn, Vorden felt like he could understand him a bit more. He tried thinking of a way to perhaps calm Leo down. The world didn't need a civil war right now. In the past, there were several civil wars before True Dream came along. There were rumors that the Dalki were keeping an eye on the humans, ready to attack at their weakest point, if something similar were to happen again. Perhaps the Dalki would attack even sooner than they predicted. Leo, when we were down there was an incredibly strong beast. For now, I think Quinn and Fex are safe, but I don't know how long they will survive. They need help now, Vorden said. After hearing these words, Leo's grip around his hilt weakened. It seemed to have worked. He stood up straight and carried on walking past the group. As he walked, he purposely barged into Andre's shoulder. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? Can't you at least show some respect? We saved your students. We didn't have to do that, and we could have kept the whole thing a secret," Andy shouted. Leo then pointed towards his own eyes and opened them up. Where the pupil should have been black, it looked as if his entire eyeball was a tint of gray. There was no color. "I'm sorry, but I'm blind, you see. I didn't know he was standing there. Faye, I will leave it up to you to do what you want with these visitors of ours. Whatever you choose, I will back it up when we return to the base." With that, Leo continued to walk into the jungle, while also carefully stepping his foot over a large root going across the floor. "Nearly tripped over that one," he said, whistling away into the jungle. "Blind my ass," and he muttered under his breath. By this point, Faye had already calmed down from her anger before. Doing or saying anything would just be a waste of breath. So she decided to take the political stance instead, doing what was best for both pirates. "Thank you for informing us of this information. Please in the future do inform us sooner. This way we can avoid any future problems." Andre bowed down to her, before leaving with his group, with a sour taste in their mouth of what they had just experienced. While Vorden and the others were revealed, all they needed to do now was wait, hope Fex and Quinn could return safely. While walking back to the others, Vorden started to think about what just happened. When he first joined the military, it seemed like they didn't care about what happened to the weaker students. They allowed fights to go on without intervening, and it was almost as if the fights were encouraged to happen. Even with the whole Duke and Peter situation, it seemed like they were purposely trying to cause friction and division between those that were weaker and stronger in the school. This did happen in the outside world naturally and in school before it. However, the divide never seemed to be as big as it was in the military school. After hearing not only Leo's reaction, but Faye's reaction as well to the students in distress and him thinking, perhaps it wasn't the whole military that was like this. Or there was also the option that it was more because of the ones that were in charge. Their connection seemed oddly close with the True Dream family, more than they should have been. After waiting for an hour, finally, Leo had returned, and this time he wasn't alone. By his side was both Fex and Quinn. Layla had run up to greet them, and the others were happy to see them as well. By now, all of the students from Dell's class had been checked up on. They were now allowed to spend time with the other classes, but news of what really happened to the class while they were out started to spread, and the tension was felt in the air. The reality of how dangerous this expedition was starting to hit them. Friends and students they had only talked to a few hours ago in the morning were nowhere to be seen, and they would ever be able to talk to them again. Leo and Faye were busy discussing what to do next. Although they were of the same rank, Faye never felt that way, and she decided she would agree with whatever Leo had decided. "I have made my decision," Leo said. "I'm going to cancel the expedition and return to the academy." "Are you sure?" Faye replied. "It's only been one day, and not much ground has been covered. Paul won't be happy with the decision. Can't we just travel as one group and protect the kids? Judging from what the travelers told us, the Dalkey settlement seems to be abandoned." "No," Leo replied immediately. "When I went down there, I could sense it. There is definitely still something there, and it's at least at the power of a four-spiked Dalkey." Hearing this, Faye's eyes nearly popped out from her skull. A shiver was sent down her whole spine, and her hairs were left standing on top of her arm. "We would need at least one of the generals here to try to deal with something like that. And even then, I don't think there would be much of a match," Leo explained. "I understand. If we explain this to Paul, they should understand. They might even remove every one of the planets and classify it as a red portal planet until further notice." Faye replied. She had actually misinterpreted Leo's words. For Leo had said there was something down there that had the same power as a four-spiked Dalkey. But she had taken this to mean there was a four-spiked Dalkey. Only Leo knew the truth, that the energy that was emitting from the being was one that was similar to both Fex and Quinn. As Leo looked over at the two students, a thought soon planted itself in his head. Is there an actual threat right underneath our noses that is probably far larger than the Dalkey? All the students had been covered on the muddy open soil area of the shelter which stood just before the jungle. Leo had told all of them there would be an announcement to be made. "I'm sure by now you have all heard of the news that has happened to Dell's class. Because of this, we have decided to cancel the expedition and head back to the school," said Leo. After hearing the news, some of the students felt a weight lift off their shoulders. No longer were they in danger and had the thoughts of meeting such things. The ones that were part of Dell's class were even more overjoyed. Still, this feeling of relief wasn't shared at all by everyone in the crowd. Those who had done well on the test so far and had run into no trouble started to voice their concern. "What?" a student complained as they looked around for support. "But it's only been one day. That doesn't make any sense. Why should they go back? Stop being so selfish." Another shouted back at them. It seemed like two camps had emerged of those that wanted to leave and those that wanted to stay. "Enough!" Leo shouted in a loud, booming voice. His voice had projected so loudly that some of the students felt like their eardrums would shatter. They wondered how a man so small was able to produce such a loud sound. The chatter had stopped, but a single student still had his hand remained up. "Yes, young one," Leo said. "I don't mind having to go back early, but I do have a question. What does this mean for our assessment? Who got the top grade? And how will our scores be divided?" The student asked politely. "Your grades will be decided by how well you have done so far. In the past, usually those that perform well on the first day, then would continue to perform well through the test. I know this might not be really fair, but we will take this into consideration based on your performance on future assessments and adjust your result accordingly. As for Dell's class, they will have an exemption due to the special circumstances they faced and will be tested at some other time. Now the winners. I suppose at these types of events, we always like to promote those that did best so the other students know who to look up to as role models. I shall decide the winners right now then. After hearing Leo say this, many of the students that had done well on the assessment so far were starting to get excited. They would straighten out their clothes and make sure their hair was ready as they were to be called up to the front. Faye walked over to where Leo was standing and tried to hand him over a clipboard with the scores of all the students' points that had been received from the scanner. Instead of taking the clipboard, Leo pushed it away and shook his head. "There is no need," Leo said and glanced towards the crowd of awaiting students. "The winners are as follows, so will these following students please come to the front? Vorden Blade, Layla Monroe, CIA Green, PIO Blank, Fex Seg, Logan Richardson, and finally, Quinn Talen." As soon as the names were called out and announced, an uproar began to erupt among the students. Why hadn't they been the ones called? The names were so unfamiliar to them. Apart from Vorden, the rest of the names that had been read out were a complete mystery to the other students. Although Logan was a high-level user, he rarely ever visited the classes, so there weren't many that knew what he looked like apart from the ones that were in his class, but even the ones that were in Logan's team were confused as to why his name was called out and not theirs, especially since Logan had gone missing from most of the expedition. However, the students weren't the only ones that seemed to be confused by their names that had been called out, but so were Quinn and the others. They hardly had the time to scan anything, and even when Peter was underground he didn't use the scanner, because it didn't work while they were down there. How did they get the top marks? Our group managed to scan around 15 different plants and 3 new beasts. Are they saying they scanned more than that? A student complained with a frown. They must have done that. Otherwise, why were they called up? Another replied. But for the students that were part of Dell's class, they knew that Quinn and the others didn't have much of an opportunity to do anything. Still, they decided to remain quiet. Many of them remembered Quinn's brave actions in saving some of the students from the advanced T-beasts and bringing them to their side. Even though there weren't any points awarded for this, they felt like whatever reward his group was going to get, they deserved it. However, there was one person in Dell's class that didn't feel the same way, and that was the teacher Dell himself. He still felt a grudge towards these two, and especially after what had happened while they were out. Dell was even surprised that the two of them were still alive. That's impossible. There must be some type of mistake or some cheating going on. Dell remarked loudly. Those students, I checked the scores on their scanner. And not only that, they had 50 points deducted from their team due to an incident that involved breaking one of my other pupils' arms. Dell then quickly looked around for the student who had suffered the arm break. But when looking, he was nowhere to be seen. He quickly realized that the student was one of the ones that had been killed on the expedition. Still, his words were just enough for the students to rile up their anger once again. "Hey, I think I recognize him. I always see him in Leo's class. They often spar with each other," a student said. Another student blinked and frowned. "Wait, so are you saying that guy's like a teacher's pet? A suck-up? This is so unfair. There's no other way to explain this. It has to be favoritism." The group of students that were voicing their concern started to grow, and now the ones that supported Quinn and the others were starting to take a step back as they quickly became the minority. Enough! Leo slammed his sheathed blade into the ground, and a small little vibration was felt on the ground. "The students that have been called, please come to the front. If I hear another word from anyone." Leo didn't finish his sentence, but they knew he didn't have to. The students had been called and arrived at the front, but instead of looks of admiration and jealousy, they were all stared down with looks of hatred. CIA, who still didn't really feel part of the group, was hating every bit of it. The only plus side of the whole thing was they would come out of this assessment with a top grade which would do well for her future. Seeing that the students' anger still hadn't been quelled, Faye herself decided to take some action based on some information she found out earlier. Listen up, all of you. There's a reason why these students here have been selected as the winner of today's event. From the crate for scanners that had been collected behind them, she looked until she pulled out one in particular. This scanner here is from the student Logan. At the time, each of these students had discovered something that was worth a lot more points than any beast or plant would ever be. After pressing a button on the scanner, a 3D-like holographic model appeared from the scanner. It showed a recreation of the town that Logan had managed to get on his scanner, the one he had made before entering the tunnels below. As you can all see, this right here is a Dalki base. It looks like they had arrived on this planet before us. This is the real reason why we are leaving. Not just because there are some powerful beasts on this planet. With that, everyone understood. No longer did the students who were opposed to leaving were complaining they too wanted to get off this planet as soon as possible. Memories and thoughts went back to situations they would often hear on the TV and internet. Cases of humans and Dalki interactions on other planets. When this happens, a fight would break out and one side would be obliterated. The problem was a single planet was never enough for either side to reignite the war once again. So one side would have to just grit their teeth and bear it. If it wasn't for these students discovering such a place, then perhaps none of us would be left standing. Leo said. With no more complaints, the students willingly grabbed their belongings and were prepared to head back to the school once again. It now made sense to the students why the shelter seemed to be on such high alert. It was because the soldiers were getting ready to move out. After all their belongings had been gathered, several portals had been pulled out and placed on the ground. While looking around, Quinn noticed that the soldiers were busy gathering their things. The same couldn't be said for the civilians who lived in their treetop homes. They stood there with worried looks on their faces peeking from above. Why aren't they packing their things? Quinn asked. What do you mean? These people have nowhere to go. Layla replied. They probably spent all the money they had to move here. Even if the military did allow them to use the teleporters and head back to Earth, they would only be made homeless with no shelter or way to earn credits. But if the soldiers leave this place, then there will be no one to protect them from beast attacks. Quinn replied. Layla remained silent when Quinn said this, and Vorden simply placed his hand on his shoulder. They were both aware of the fate of these people. While Quinn was a little naive, the government had helped him when his parents disappeared, so why couldn't they help them as well? He thought. He was starting to think his situation was stranger and stranger, but more than anything he was deeply concerned for the people above. Not only were there adults present, but also children. While the students walked through the teleporters, a young little girl who looked only around the age of 5 started to wave a hand goodbye to the students, unaware of what was happening. This world needs to change. The people at the top need to come crumbling down, and when I'm strong enough, I'll come back for you. Quinn said, although he was aware by that time it would probably be too late. Deep underground at the abandoned town, a strange man was still standing on the top floor completely naked. He had been standing there for a while now as he waited for his body to wake up. He was unaware of how long he had been out for. Still, it would take some time for his body's function to return to what it once was. I don't know why it's a vampire's tradition to put one in one of those cylinders completely naked when one is to go into eternal sleep. They could at least allow for a set of clothes to be left behind. The man said as he seemed deeply concerned by this matter. I can't just go out and greet the people outside like this. They'll think I've gone mad. Or madder might be the correct term. He said as he started to laugh out loud at his own words. Didn't I leave some basic treasure of mine behind? I believe it was a set or armor. Although, whoever entered the tower might have taken a vital piece. I did leave it there as a reward. Let's just hope they didn't choose the area that covers the crown jewels. As the naked man walked down the spiraling staircase, he continued to pace himself sloppily while holding his chained sword in his right hand. Eventually he had reached the platform where another room was located in the center part of the tower. When entering the room, he immediately could see that 5 metallic cylinders were present. Looks like someone did take an item. Well, that's fine. They did wake me up after all. As the man walked over to the podium, which wasn't encased in a metallic cylinder. As he looked down, he blinked and raised a brow. Now, out of all the items available for them to get, why on earth would they choose to take the ring? The man thought to himself, rather confused. Inside the dimly lit room, with the torches of flames flickering, the man stood there wondering about why would anyone choose to take the ring? Out of all the items that he had left behind, it seemed strange. Any experienced vampire at first glance could tell that it was the weakest of the items that had been left and even the least valuable. Maybe it had been a mistake. The man thought. Whatever it was, for now, the man was thankful for he needed a new set of clothing. Once he changed and found the person who had woken him up, he would allow whoever had the ring to exchange it for something else, he thought. He then walked over to the other 5 podiums that were covered in the strange metal casing. As he placed his fingertips on the cold outside, in an instant, they seemed to react and started to vibrate. Each one of them went back into the ground, revealing the pieces of armor that were once there. After strapping all the armor on, he was no longer naked, although through the gaps between certain parts, bare white skin could still be seen, as he was still wearing nothing underneath. The helmet allowed for most of his face to be seen. It had 2 spiraling red horns on the top, with a thin piece of metal that went down to the nose. This will have to do. For now, let's just hope I wasn't woken up in the middle of a war. Perhaps that's why the person had left in a hurry after waking me up. The man thought. He continued to go down the spiraling staircase, but he found everything a bit strange. If war really was going on, why wasn't he hearing anything outside? Soon though he had his answer. When stepping outside, he had expected one of 2 things. A parade of people to be there to welcome him back, or a big fight to be taking place. But he saw neither of those things. Instead, all that was left was an abandoned town. When stepping out, he could feel that there was no sign of any others like him in the area, just beasts. He didn't give up, though. Maybe my senses have yet to wake up, he told himself as he continued to look around at the buildings nearby. He searched and searched, but there was nothing. A few beasts that sensed he was near scurried away, not wanting anything to do with the new presence. Finally, he came across something that looked a little interesting. It was a strange human-sized beast that looked like it had been killed not too long ago. The reason why he found it interesting, though, was because he could sense strange energy from it similar to his own. Now why would a blood crystal have been left behind with a beast? Seeing this, and feeling the same energy of the beast, he started to think maybe his awakening was an accident. Somehow the blood crystal he had left behind with one of his family members had ended up in the hands of this beast. From the looks of the area, it had been abandoned long ago, but he still had no clue how long he had been asleep for. It was quite possible that someone had killed the beast, taken the crystal, and then entered the tower unaware of everything that was happening. That would also explain why they would choose to take the ring if they had no clue what the other items did. Perhaps my stinginess paid off in the end, he said, laughing to himself. Before going into eternal sleep, his closest aide, Stephen, had asked him to leave behind certain treasures. They had also asked him to set up trials in the tower, but the man was too lazy for that. When picking out items, he chose the ones that he felt were the easiest to replace. Stephen was confused by his actions. If he was going into eternal sleep anyway, it would be best to leave his best equipment for those of the next generation, but once a cheapskate, always a cheapskate. It was impossible for Stephen to change his nature. Thinking back at how it might be possible, there was also the chance that someone not a part of his family or a different species had obtained the blood crystal. He was now glad he didn't leave out powerful items. Otherwise, it could have caused trouble for the outside. Well, no use thinking about it now, the man said as he stretched his arms. Before I choose to go back to sleep, I'm quite curious about what happened to everyone here, and I guess there's only one way to find out. The man continued to walk out of the town into the tunnels. The sword was now wrapped around his back, using the chains to hold it onto his chest piece of armor. It seemed like he had picked a tunnel at random when walking. Still, after choosing one path, it carried on for a while until eventually sunlight could be seen at the end. A step was taken out of the tunnel and into the sunlight. The man was surrounded by jungle nature, and the rays of sunlight shot through the trees and leaves. They were touching both the skin on his hands and the open area on his face. However, unlike with Quinn and Fex, there was no reaction for the man. My skin's a little itchy. It would have been nice to have that ring. Otherwise, I might develop a rash of some sort, he complained as he scratched the front of his hand. Ah! A scream was suddenly heard coming from his right. Immediately, without thinking about it, he started to dash in the direction of the scream. Moving at an incredible speed, He was able to maneuver around, avoiding the trees and hitting away the branches and vines that would block his path. Eventually, he could see a little girl just by a river, but she wasn't alone. A large snake, nearly 4 times the size of the girl, was up on its body with its head held high looking at her. The girl tried to back away, but there was nowhere left for her to go, as the river was behind her and the large black snake in front. The snake dashed forward with its head leading forward. With nothing else to do, the girl closed her eyes and screamed once more. She felt like her life was over. When no pain was felt, she decided to open her eyes again. The snake was no longer there. It had disappeared entirely, and instead stood in its place was a man in strange red armor. Seeing the snake had gone, she collapsed onto the floor with her knees hitting the stony hard ground. "I thought I was going to die," she said, crying. "It's okay," the man said. "The big snake is gone and won't bother you anymore." When looking at the girl, he noticed that there were a few cuts on her body. The worst wound was one on her knee. It was severely scraped and blood was being drawn from it. The man grabbed her leg and looked at it carefully. "It looks quite bad, but I should be able to help you with that." He then spat on both of his hands and started to rub them together. The girl started to cry even louder, seeing the man do these strange actions. "You're a weirdo. I'm going to be killed by a weirdo," she cried. No, don't worry. I'm not trying to do anything strange," he replied. "Trust me, my spit is like magic." He then placed his spit-covered hands on top of the knee, holding it down. The girl felt no pain and waited a few moments, still unsure whether to trust the stranger or not. When the man let go of her knee, the wound had completely disappeared. Looking at it, she was amazed. "Thank you, sir. You must have the ability to heal," she said. "Ability?" The man replied back, confused. "What's your name?" she asked. "You can call me Arthur." Just then, the smile that was on the girl's face only seconds ago dropped. She started pulling on Arthur's arm hard. "Arthur, me and you are friends, right?" Arthur nodded in response. "Then please, you have to help me, my family, everyone. They're in trouble. The soldiers, they went away. I don't know why, but they left us all here, and shortly after, there was an attack. At first, we managed to stop them, but after killing the first beast, more started to come." As she spoke these words, she was struggling to breathe, gasping for air in between. Arthur could see this was tough for her. She looked extremely young, barely older than 5. He then picked her up with one hand and brought her close to his chest. "Just tell me where to go." The girl pointed in a direction, and Arthur immediately moved. It wasn't as quick as before. However, the girl could still feel how fast he was moving, as a breeze similar to when one was riding a bike fast was felt on her face. Every so often, Arthur would stop and ask the girl for directions. She knew roughly where the area was but wasn't sure. She had been running away from the beast and had gotten slightly lost. "I'm so sorry, Arthur," the girl said, sniffing his nose into the air. He could smell it. "Don't worry, I know where they are." A sweet smell entered his nose, a scent he remembered vividly. The smell of blood. Heading towards the direction of the sweat smell, it didn't take long for Arthur to finally reach the shelter. He paused for a second to assess the chaotic situation that was in front of his eyes, a sight he had seen too often, but was hoping not to see when he first had woken up. There were multiple advanced T-dinosaur plant beasts. They were the same ones that the group of students had encountered and had so much trouble dealing with. 3 in total, and all were using their vines, grabbing and pulling the humans off from the platforms and bridges in the large trees above. They were making an effort fending off the vines with the little beast equipment they had, and some were even using their weak abilities. But the group of humans was spread thin. There were around 200 of them in total, living in the trees. While the bulk was dealing with the vines, the others were dealing with snakes, wasp-like creatures, and even a few giant spiders. Many people had already died, and soon it looked like they would all perish. "Stay here," Arthur said as he placed the girl down on the floor just behind a large tree. Before leaving, he touched the ground just underneath her feet. "Don't worry, you will be safe if anything comes after you." Dashing forward, he clenched his hand into a fist. "You guys aren't worth using my sword on," Arthur said. At the same time, Arthur was relatively low on blood, so he didn't want to use any of his blood skills, so he opted to use his brute strength. Not once did he slow down, and now he was right next to the beast's back leg. Using the momentum, he threw his fist, slamming it into the creature's back right foot. A loud shockwave sound was heard, and an indent was made. The humans were above, fighting on the bridges and platform. They were only able to see the upper bodies of the large, giant dinosaur-like beasts. Then abruptly, in the middle of their fighting, a loud bang was heard. A few seconds later, one of the beasts toppled over onto its side, and its enormous body was slammed onto the ground. The weight of 90 tons hitting the ground was felt even high up in the trees as the leaves shook and fell. What happened? A woman shouted who had a bandana across her forehead. She had been leading the group for a while now. It was really only because of her quick decision making the group of people were able to last as long as they had done. I don't know. One of the beasts suddenly fell over. Whatever it is, it has to be good news, right, Ruby? A man replied as he knocked a vine away coming from another beast, not too far away from the first one. Not necessarily. Maybe it's something even stronger. A beast more powerful taking them out. I'm starting to wonder just why the soldiers went up and left like that. Ruby replied. It was only seconds after the first large beast had been taken down, but the same thing happened again to the next one, and shortly after the third beast had fallen as well. Ruby quickly went over to the edge of the platform and peeked her head over. Not only had the beasts fallen, but they weren't even moving anymore. On closer inspection, she noticed she could see the smallest of wounds, one the size of a fist in a part of its neck. Isn't that where the beast crystal is located? She thought. If the beast crystal was removed, it wouldn't always result in the instant death of a beast. Still, it would get rid of the majority of its powers and eventually lead it to die. They had never themselves encountered this type of creature before, so they had no clue where the crystal was located. But it was a good idea to target the crystal to weaken it. The strange thing about this type of action was it was unusual for a beast to do this type of thing. Ruby looked and looked to see if she could see what had defeated them, whether they were friend or foe, but she could see no one and nothing. Having given up on finding what had possibly saved them, she decided to turn her attention to the rest of the platform and other areas that were still being attacked. When she turned her head, she could see that most of the beasts had gone and been dealt with. A group of people had gathered around a single man and were gossiping and talking. No longer fighting. What happened? She asked as she walked over to the group of people. This man, you won't believe it, but he saved us all. A man shouted with excitement as he called Ruby over. Ruby gulped as she was afraid that the others might be befriending someone they soon might have to fight. When the crowd of people moved to allow Ruby to meet the man, she could finally see what had saved them. However, what she was looking at was nothing like she thought it would be. She could only think one thing: handsome. At this point, Arthur had already killed the 3 advanced tier beasts along with a majority of the intermediate tier beasts on the platform and bridges. It didn't take long for the rest of the beasts to know they were outmatched and started to run away. Right now, Arthur no longer had his helmet on. He had gotten a little hot from fighting and running about due to the helmet, and decided to take it off for now and held by his side. When the others saw his face, they thought it was one of a hero. How could someone this handsome exist and be this perfect? The world was cruel for giving those already with good looks, strong abilities, and powers the others thought. He wished to talk to the people, hoping to find some answers from them about just what had happened on this planet. But he knew they had just come out of a challenging situation, and it would be a while before they could answer properly. His questions could wait. He was used to waiting. He had all the time in the world, but it wasn't the same for humans. Their time was limited. Thank you for helping us. We are in your debt, Ruby said as she bowed down. Ruby! Ruby! An old woman came running out from one of the wooden houses on the platform. She had a worried look on her face as she called out to her. What's wrong, mother? Ruby asked. I'm sorry. It's Minnie. I don't know where she is. I looked everywhere for her, the old woman replied. No, Minnie, Ruby said quietly, as it looked like she was about to collapse, but one of the men standing by her side managed to catch her just in time. Don't worry, we will find her. She's a clever girl and strong just like her mother, said the man. When hearing these words, Arthur realized the girl he had met earlier looked quite similar to the older girl in front of him. Was this a little girl around the age of 6? She had curly black hair. "That's right," Ruby said. Arthur then pointed to the muddy ground below. Cindy had come out from the trees once the beast had disappeared. "I'm down here, guys," she said with a big smile on her face waving above. "Minnie, watch out." Ruby screamed at the top of her lungs. One of the beasts had still yet to leave the area. It was a human-sized black and yellow wasp-like creature, and it had set its sight on the little girl. Hovering from above, it came nosediving down. The people and Ruby felt lost and hopeless. They were just way too far away to do anything, and none of them had the power to stop what was just about to happen. The only one that didn't look worried, though, was Arthur. As the wasp creature got closer to Minnie, just underneath her foot, the shadows started to move like an ocean. Then when the wasp was inches away, a gigantic hand appeared from Minnie's shadows and grabbed the wasp, stopping it in its tracks. Arthur then held out his hand and said 2 words. "Shadow lock." The shadow dissipated, and with it, the wasp did too. As usual, the head General Puel had left on one of his expeditions. This meant that the 3 other generals were left to run the military base, including the school, while the others were away. Mike, the oldest and most experienced of the generals, was mainly in charge of running the base and other soldiers when this happened. This was a task usually for the head general, but because he was often away on other work, Mike would be put in charge. What this meant was the remaining 2 generals, Nathan, head of first years, and Duke, head of second years, were in charge of running the school. Inside his office, Nathan had his feet up on his desk and was laid back in his chair. It was the first time he felt like this in a while. With the first years on the outing, there wasn't much for him to do at the moment, and for the first time, he could finally take a break. "I wish I had this much free time every day," Nathan said. Although he was still concerned for the students, the fact that Leo would be with them eased him a little. He was one of the very few people who actually knew Leo's real strength. The probability of the students being on a high-risk planet was low, but even if they were, he was sure Leo could deal with it. Just then, a loud knock was heard on his door. "Come in," Nathan shouted. The soldier quickly opened the door and had a panicked look all over his face. "So, it's Sergeant Leo. He has sent a message informing us that he will be coming back soon." "What?" Nathan said, jumping out of his chair. "It's only been 1 day." The man gulped before passing on the next bit of information. "That's not all, so I think you better take a look at the report he sent. It seems like the whole shelter will be evacuating from the place." Quickly, Nathan read the detailed report that had been written out, and his eyes opened up wide. If what was in the report was true, he couldn't fault Leo's decision-making. Inside the portal room, in the school, multiple medical staff and military personnel were there waiting on standby due to Nathan's orders. The information from the integration at the shelter had been passed on. Most of the students had already been healed at the shelter, but this was just a precautionary measure. Nathan was also standing in the room, nervously tapping his foot away until finally the portal started to flicker. First to come through the portal was Leo, and eventually all the students began to follow from behind. The students were led to their class groups where their teachers would round them and wait for further instructions. When the last student had exited the portal, and everyone there had been confirmed present, Nathan gave the command. "Cut the link," Nathan ordered. 2 soldiers immediately ran up to the portal and pressed 2 buttons on either side of the portal. A few seconds later, and the orange wavy-like color had disappeared. Now, when looking at the portal through the circle, the other end of the wall could be seen. This was a necessary step to make sure that no beasts or other things would be able to follow them from behind and enter the base. The portal was then quickly taken away, off to the side. It wouldn't be used for student activity and would only be used once again when the portal color had been changed to red, and for stronger soldiers to enter. The students didn't know what was going on as they waited in the room for the next command. While doing so, Vorden had a heavy thought on his mind as he looked over in the direction of CIA. "Hey Quinn, we need to do something about CIA," Vorden whispered. "She saw your abilities, and not only that, but she also saw Fex transform into that thing. I don't know why she hasn't told anyone yet, but it's too risky for her to know." Hearing this, Quinn couldn't agree more. It didn't matter why CIA was keeping it a secret. Unlike the others before, she wasn't a friend. "Before you go," Vorden said, as he placed his hand outward and handed something over to Quinn. When looking at what he had just been given, Quinn noticed it looked identical to the earring that Fex was wearing. Black in color and a rectangular shape. "It's that flying bull. It told me to hand it back to Fex. While you're talking to him, you can hand it back." Quinn looked at the item and found it interesting that the bull was able to transform into a small piece of jewelry like this. It really made him wonder if he would be able to get something like this. As he walked over to Fex and handed over the earring, he leaned over and started to whisper. "Hey Fex, we were just speaking, but do you think you could use your skills on CIA to make her forget about the whole situation?" Quinn asked. "I don't think it will be a problem, but I'll be honest with you. It's a lot of information, and a lot of things happened. It will be hard to fill in the blanks in her head if I do this. It might even cause her brain to be slightly damaged, removing so many events." Quinn didn't like the sound of that. He hated the thought that perhaps he would have to hurt people related to his matter just to keep a secret. Just because she had the fate of joining Quinn's team, it was possible she would now suffer for it. When someone did something wrong to him, like the time in the desert, he had no problems, but CIA hadn't directly tried to hurt him. "What do you think?" Quinn asked, hoping for some guidance. "If it was down to me, I would have removed her memories already. It's just too risky, Quinn. I know you by now, and maybe you feel bad for her. But if humans find out about us, then that means the vampires will find out about us, and I'm more worried about them. They will kill and slaughter every person that knows of this secret to keep it hidden." What Fex said had hit Quinn quite hard. Not only would they go after him, but Vorden, Peter, Layla, Erin, Leo. It would affect multiple people who had only helped him so far. "Sometimes, we have to sacrifice a few to save the many," Quinn mumbled as he clenched his fist. He hated saying these words, but he needed to convince himself. It felt like what he was about to do right now was no different from what the military was doing. They hadn't even tried to save the people at the shelter they were just at. But they had a choice while Quinn felt like he did not. "Go ahead," Quinn said as he gave a nod. Right now, CIA had departed from the others. She had agreed to herself that she would keep the others secret. But honestly, the main reason was she didn't want to even get involved with people like that. A group of students who had way too many secrets. It just smelt like trouble. She herself didn't like the military that much in the first place, so getting on their good side didn't mean much for her. If she could go through her life without ever having to interact with the others again, then she would be happy. The problem was she couldn't. While deep in thought about what her next move would be, she felt someone walking up from behind. "You," she said, a little startled as she moved back a bit. Still in her head were images of what the student had turned into. Although she was terrified, she quickly took a deep breath and calmed herself down. There was a high chance that Fex just had a transform ability that changed him into a type of muscular creature. Still, she remembered the power and loss of control Fex had back then, and it seemed like the bloodsucker was a lot more frightening than even the king-tier beast they had faced. "Don't worry, you won't be afraid of me anymore," Fex said as his eyes started to glow red. It was the usual thing, and something Fex had done plenty of times while in school. He just needed to wait for the typical response as her eyes would start to grow dull and glow a slight red in return. CIA, seeing Fex's eyes slightly change, stepped back. "Hey, what are you trying to do to me?" she shouted. As she said this, a few of the students nearby had turned their head to look at what was going on. "Oh, why isn't it working? Am I too tired? No, it can't be that." Fex thought. Is her mind strong? He didn't quite clock on to what was happening at first, since it was a feeling he wasn't used to. But it was clear that she was able to resist his powers. Seeing that now others were paying attention to them, Fex quickly turned around. "Sorry, just forget about it," he said as he walked off back to the others. "Did you do it?" Quinn asked, unsure what had just happened. "No," Fex replied. She resisted against it. It's the first time something like this has happened. Isn't she only a level 4 ability user, Quinn thought. The influence skill relied on one's charm skill. Up to this point, Fex's charm had always been higher and stronger than Quinn's. Fex had used his ability on several students before, and that included level 4 ability users. He never thought of the possibility of his influence not working. The problem was, it didn't matter how strong the individual was with their abilities. It was all about how strong their mind was. There were some people Quinn could imagine the influence skill never working on, such as Logan, Vorden, and Leo. These people were just too strong-willed. However, when looking at CIA, he didn't feel the same way. Wasn't she just an ordinary student? So why didn't Fex's influence skill work on her? Hearing the shocking news that Fex had just failed, Quinn was busy pondering what to do. There was always the chance that something like this might happen. Perhaps a high level would see them, and they would be unable to deal with it in the usual way. This thought was always on the back of Quinn's mind. When he thought about it again and again, the ending that played out in his head was always the same. He would have to kill them. It was too risky to leave something open, and while he was still in military school, there was no chance to run away or escape. While looking at CIA, images started to flash through Quinn's mind of the possible ways he could do this, and a certain disturbing image entered his head. One of him holding CIA in both hands with blood dripping from his mouth. And by her neck were 2 puncture wounds. Hey, why don't you try to clear her memory? Fex said. This suggestion might have seemed out of the blue before, but right now not so much. Fex had his reasons. After witnessing Quinn fight against the king-tier beast, he knew that his speed was already of that of a vampire noble. Fex wasn't sure if Quinn had evolved and gone to the stage of vampire noble just yet, but there was still a chance his charm was stronger than his. Coincidentally, when Fex had made this suggestion, Quinn thought the same thing. Were his current charm points higher than Fex's? He felt a great increase in speed once his points had reached above 30. If his charm skills didn't work currently against CIA, there was actually a good chance that it could still work once his charm skills had reached above 30. It could work, but if it doesn't? Before he could even make a decision, Nathan had already started to make an announcement. Listen up, everyone, Nathan said as he raised his hand in the air. There is no need for the students to stay here any longer. Feel free to head back to your rooms, and in the morning we shall inform you of your schedule next week. We might even send a message out tonight, so keep an eye out for it on your wristwatch. As for all homeroom teachers, I would like you to stay behind for now. As soon as Nathan said those words, the doors to the portal hall were opened wide, and the students already started heading back to their dorm rooms. They were tired, defeated, and just wanted to forget about the experience they had gone through. When looking around, CIA had already gone. It was now nighttime, and the curfew for the students to stay in their rooms was just about to pass. For now, he would have to trust Layla to keep an eye on her, until he met up with her the next day. All the students promptly left the room, and the teachers remained along with the sergeants and Nathan. First, I would like to tell you the whole planet has been evacuated of military personnel for now. We will no longer be required to explore the planet, and a special ops unit will be sent in the future to figure out whether the Dalki already has inhabited the place or not. Nathan explained. Wait, I don't understand. Dell said, a little frustrated. I thought we all left because we knew the Dalki were there. Our information sources say they might have been chased away or even something else. The reason why I am saying this is due to their base still being full of blue crystals. If the Dalki really had taken over the planet already, they would have taken all the crystals with them already. Although Dell didn't have any wishes to continue the mission alone, he thought they might still have a chance to complete it with Leo and Faye by his side. He knew what the military was like. He had been with them long enough. Because this expedition had been cancelled early, they would soon ask them to go on another one. If they had finished this one, they might have been good for a whole year. This information would have been passed on to you all later on anyway. Nathan explained. The real reason why I asked you to stay behind is due to the upcoming inter-military base event in 2 weeks. What does that have to do with us? A female teacher asked. Usually, all the second years take all the places, right? Yes, usually that is the case, but this year they have decided to do something different. Apparently, there are a few strong first-year students from the other military bases that wish to take part in the event. So this year, they have decided that each class must select at least one student for the 3 main events. Ranged Ability Tournament, fighting tournament, and a crafting tournament. You all should have a list ready for me by the end of the week of who you think will participate. Paul has stated that this interim military tournament is an important event, so you must select your best. If your students do well, this will reflect on you, and you shall be rewarded for it. Not all of our positions are based on strength, and soon one of our oldest sergeants will be retiring. Does anyone have a list of the current ranking of students? Hearing what Nathan had just said, Dell started to have a slightly worried look on his face. Not only did the students think Dell's class was one of the weakest ones, but the teachers did as well, and Dell was aware of this. In his head, he was trying to think just who to pick for the event. A soldier from the side walked up to Nathan and handed him over a tablet. On the tablet was a list of every first-year student with a score beside their name. Well, this is a surprise. Nathan said. It seems like Dell's class has the most top-ranked students currently. Hearing this, his jaw nearly dropped to the floor. How could it be? He thought. Then suddenly, he started to remember what had just happened. Leo had awarded the group with the most points for the outing. That group belonged to his class. Not only that, but in the last assessment, Quinn and his group didn't do too bad either, scoring around the mid-level. With top scores in one and middle scores in the other, it positioned Quinn's group and teammates relatively high on the current ranking. I shall be expecting some good things from you. Nathan said as he looked at Dell. Now go get some rest, everyone. I will update you with what is to happen tomorrow. At another military base, it seemed like the group of teachers were having a similar meeting. However, this one was a lot more formal. All the teachers had gathered in a meeting room. There were a total of 10 teachers, including the sergeant that sat at the head of the table. One of the teachers was sat upright, stiff and still, listening keenly to every word being said. Does everyone understand? A relatively large fat man sat at the front. Yes, sir. Silver replied the quickest and was most responsive. Why can't you guys be more like her? The man said. Not only does she always look stunning in the morning, but she works hard and is responsive, and she's the new one. Keep this up. The man then turned off the presentation as he left the meeting room. The other teachers followed, leaving the room one by one, when a male student named Justin noticed that Silver still hadn't left from her seat. She had been in the same position the whole meeting, and even with it having ended, she stayed there firm. Hey, Silver, the meeting's over. Are you coming back? Justin asked. Silver turned her head, and her silver hair with strands of black as tossed across her face. As Justin saw this, he felt like he was watching one of those shampoo commercials in slow motion. Everything seemed to slow down as he appreciated her beauty. I'm sorry, my mind was on something else, Silver said as she stood up from her seat and walked straight past Justin out of the door, ignoring him. Wait, Justin called out. Maybe I can help. Do you need anything? Silver lifted her hand and wafted it about in the air. I don't think I would even ask for your help with boiling an egg. Just stick to teaching. As she walked off, her head was still filled with one thought. In the meeting they had mentioned the tournament was coming up. Every single base would travel to Base 1 to participate. The largest military base of them all. Hey, she would finally meet the person she was looking for. I can almost smell you, Fex, she said as she licked her lips. The students had a better sleep they did when comparing to the whole time they had spent at school. They were exhausted from the trip, and more than they realized, both mentally as well as physically. Although a lot of them didn't like the military school, they had to admit it was nice to be back here. In terms of danger, it's one of the safest places they could be right now. Late last night, a message was sent out to all of the students stating that their morning classes had been cancelled. At the same time, in the afternoon, they would be required to return to their homeroom classes. Before anything else, Quinn decided to make a stop just outside the girls' dorm and was currently standing outside Layla's room. He had traveled there the early morning the second he was able to leave his room. It seemed like no one else had woken up yet. A knock was made, and he patiently waited until a drowsy-looking Layla had answered the door. She was standing there by the doorway, rubbing her eyes with her short pink pajama bottoms and a shirt that didn't have the top 3 buttons done up. It looked as if the shirt was barely hanging onto her, as the top of her shoulders could be seen. Who's here so early in the morning? She said as she finally stopped rubbing her eyes. Quinn. Wait, Quinn, she shouted. Quickly, Layla grabbed her shirt, doing her buttons up as her face had gone bright red. If she knew who was coming to the door, she would have been better dressed than this. But it was too late, and Quinn had already seen her. Regaining her composure, she wanted to redirect the attention back towards Quinn. "Do you need something? It must be important if you came this early." When asking the question, she took a look at his face, noticing that while she was flustered and worried about the situation, it hadn't affected Quinn at all. He didn't feel embarrassed by what he had just seen, and the situation seemed to only be awkward for her. "I didn't realize I was that unattractive," she thought, although that wasn't the case at all. When Quinn had first seen her at the door, the first thing he thought was she had quite a nice body, showing more skin than he should have been able to have seen. The problem was, ever since turning into a full vampire, even though the feelings were there, it was as if they felt suppressed. They didn't show out on the surface. There were a few times this happened to him before, such as when he was scared. For certain situations, he thought it was quite helpful. When going through the whole ordeal with Peter and seeing him eat the human flesh, he believed it was the only thing that had gotten him through it. Otherwise, he might have never been able to sleep again. The other situation where it had helped was during fights. Before, when fighting as a human, the adrenaline would get to him. His hands and body would start trembling before the fight had even begun. Still, just as some feelings were suppressed, others seemed to be amplified, and one of these feelings was anger. There were a few occasions when he felt like this feeling had wholly consumed him and taken over. Of course, he had this happen as a human. When one was so angry, they didn't even know what they were doing, and their body acted before they did. Only now these angry episodes seemed to be happening more often. Things that wouldn't have bothered him so much was starting to grate on him, like the shopkeeper, and when CIA had stabbed him with her spirit spear. Peeking his head slightly through the door, he started to look around if he could see CIA. In the room, he could see a bundle of quilts all rolled up and a person inside fast asleep. "Did she do anything to you last night?" Quinn whispered. Layla then walked forward and closed the door slightly behind her as she shook her head. "We didn't speak much before she was a team member. Honestly, it's pretty much the same as she said before. We still talk to each other casually, but didn't say anything about what happened on the trip at all." Hearing this, Quinn didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Was she just trying to pretend everything didn't happen? "If you don't mind," Quinn asked, "would you be able to get her to come here now? Say I need to speak to her about something." "I can try," Layla said. Layla walked up to CIA's bed and planned to try to gently wake her up by rolling her backwards and forwards, but when she was just a few steps away from the bed, CIA said, "I'm awake. You don't have to wake me up." She took the quilt off and sat upright. Unlike Layla, she was already in her military uniform rather than her pajamas. She then looked Layla in the eyes. "It's one of your friends, right?" she said. "I'll speak to them, but please, come with me." When saying these words, Layla could feel they were genuine, and there was a slight fear in them. It was a normal reaction after what she had seen. When getting off the bed and walking towards the door, without asking, she forcefully grabbed Layla's hand. She practically dragged her with her to the door. Quinn could see the two of them holding hands and didn't know quite what to make of it. "I was wondering which one of you they would send to come to talk to me," CIA said. "But I guess it would make sense for the so-called leader they all follow to come to speak to me." "Leader," Quinn replied strangely. He never saw himself as the leader of the group. That position, he felt like, belonged more to either Vorden or Logan. They were the ones making the decisions most of the time. The reason why CIA had come to this conclusion was it seemed like whenever they were planning stuff or talking, everyone in the group would always naturally ask Quinn for confirmation. It was as if Quinn didn't agree with it, then they wouldn't go through with it. Even if he didn't feel that way, it was clear he was the natural leader of their group. Ignoring what had just been said, Quinn decided to continue with what he wanted to do. He wasted no time and immediately activated his influence skill. Once again, CIA could see the person's eyes in front of her glow red. Only this time, something was drawing her in as her mind seemed to drift away. Noticing what was happening, she clenched her left fist hard and was free while the other hand was holding onto Layla. While Quinn was in the middle of using his skill, he could suddenly smell something sweet. "Is that blood?" The drifting feeling was no longer felt, and CIA's mind was back where it was once again. When looking towards the direction of the smell, Quinn noticed that CIA's hand was dripping blood. She had managed to dig her own fingernails into the palm of her hand to cause an immense amount of pain, redirecting her mind somewhere else, causing his skill to fail. The action didn't go unnoticed, and even Layla was impressed. One would have to have an extreme willpower to be able to hurt themselves to the point where they would bleed. The normal reaction for a human was to not hurt itself. Even the agents at Pure would struggle to do something like this. "Again, you guys tried doing something to me," she said as she backed away, now clenching Layla's hand even tighter. "Look, if it's about what I saw, I won't say anything. I don't know why you are hiding your abilities and your power. The only thing I will say to you is, don't threaten me. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not like people you have met before. Remember, I'm keeping your secret. So if I need a favor from you guys, I'll be coming to you." With that, CIA slammed the door shut and Quinn was unable to get the last word in. "Maybe it didn't work now, but I felt something," he said. Quinn could feel that it started to work, but her mind was just a little too strong as she was able to resist his charm skills. If he was to get his charm points over 30, he was confident he could remove her memory. CIA hadn't told their secret so far, even though there were plenty of opportunities. For now, he would just have to keep an eye on her and trust Layla to make sure she didn't say anything. Still, he would prepare himself for Plan B. Inside the room, CIA's heart was beating at an incredible rate, and Layla could feel and see this too. She was wondering why it seemed like CIA trusted her so much. She was just a part of Quinn's group as much as anyone else. CIA then looked over at Layla and gave a big smile. "Do you not even think of me as part of Quinn's team?" Layla thought. With the first job on Quinn's list done, there were a few more things he wanted to take a look at. In his hand right now was the blue crystal that he had obtained from the tunnel from below. He was sure Logan would be interested in such a thing, but there was a second reason he wanted to visit Logan as well. To see and test out the detail of the new skill he had obtained, Shadow Eater. A knock was heard on one of the doors in the VIP dorm area, and while waiting for Logan to answer, Quinn started to look around the place. The area around them covered the same size as the area of the boys' dorms just underneath. Roughly 250 students were living below, so it made Quinn start to wonder just how many VIP students were possibly at the school. The rooms were far larger, but still, whenever Quinn came up here, he never saw anyone come out from their rooms. It made him think that maybe most of the rooms were empty or they just liked staying indoors all the time like Logan. Maybe there were some students they still hadn't seen or met that were just as strong as Logan and Vorden. While in the middle of his thought, Logan had opened the door and immediately pulled Quinn in by the sleeve before shutting the door behind them. To his surprise, Peter was already in the room as well. "I don't sleep, remember," Peter said, seeing that Quinn looked confused. "Don't mind him," Logan said. "He was just helping me along with my research." When looking at Peter, it seemed like he was more being used as a human vending machine. In his arms, he held multiple sandwiches and drinks and was just standing there in one place. If he didn't know any better, he would have thought Peter's master had been Logan rather than himself. When did the two of them get so close? Although this wasn't a bad thing, it was good if Peter could listen to others without the need for Quinn to use his blood or force command on Peter. Logan had quickly gone to one of his workbenches, where it looked like he was analyzing something. He placed a strange-looking digital monocle on one eye and had his tool glove on the other. "So, what did you want?" Logan asked. "I actually came to give you a gift." As Quinn said those words, he stopped midway. When walking over to the bench, he had spotted that Logan already had what Quinn was about to give him. Currently, on the workbench was the blue crystal. It looked identical to the one Quinn was just about to give. The crystal was placed in a strange device and had multiple wires and crocodile clips attached. Information was being processed from the crystal to the computer. After placing the crystal down by Logan's side, he let out a big sigh. "I should have known you would have taken one already," Quinn remarked and proceeded to ask, "Well, what is it? Have you figured it out already?" Logan spun around in his chair and lifted his monocle from his left eye. It was slightly red as if he hadn't blinked for a long time while inspecting the crystal. I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you one thing. These crystals radiate and give the same energy as a beast crystal. Logan explained. What? But there were thousands of them underneath the planet. Is this the first time something like this has been discovered? Quinn asked. Logan then proceeded to pick up the crystal. Quinn handed him and replaced it with the other crystal. After confirming that both of the crystals were indeed the same type, he began his explanation. I don't think so. I have a little theory of mine, you see. I always found it odd that the military was so concerned about conquering the beast planets before the Dalki did. It didn't really make any sense to me. Sure, the beasts could be used to make better weapons, but why the need to beat the Dalki to the punch? I think that the military doesn't just want these planets for the beasts, but quite possible for these crystals we found as well. Maybe these crystals are also the answer to where do the magical beasts come from in the first place. They don't mate like normal mammals. We have confirmed that much. Logan explained. You said the crystals were like beast crystals. Do you know what they do? Quinn asked. That will be part of my next phase. When I find out more information, I'll come tell you. Thanks for the second crystal. Honestly, I was afraid of melting the only crystal I had down, so this will be a big help to my research. Oh, by the way, did you find anything in the tower that might be interesting? Logan asked. Since coming back from the portal outing, Quinn had never mentioned he had gone to the tower. He was always amazed how Logan was able to guess things, and after lying to him before, it felt a little harder to lie to him again. He looked down at his hand and saw the ring. In truth, the only thing he had obtained from the tower was the ring. There were other items, but he didn't get any of the others. I only got this beast ring, Quinn said. There was other stuff there, even a strong-looking sword, but we were unable to get it. Quinn went on to explain further about specific details to Logan. He didn't say it was a vampire tomb, but did talk about the blood crystal he had in his hand and how it got taken away. It's a shame about that blood crystal. That might have also helped us out with these blue crystals as well, Logan said as he went back to inspecting the blue crystals. Looking around the room, Quinn spotted the VR machine. He hadn't used the one in Logan's room for a while now, especially since Logan gave him the stick that allowed him to connect to the private servers from any of the VR capsules. Hey, you don't mind if I use that, do you? Quinn asked. Logan wafted his hand in the air, not even saying a word. There was no need to ask Logan anymore if he could use it. There was now quite a bond of trust between everyone in the group. They had experienced a life-threatening event together, and that always seemed to bring people closer together. After entering the VR pod, Quinn logged into the private server and was now in the white training space. System skill, Shadow Eater. Info. For the first time, when unlocking a skill, there was no information on what the skill could do or its effect. When trying to use the skill, it was the same result. Before he could use the system to activate the shadow skills, and this was the same with his blood skills. He would only have to think of the skill before using it, and his body would slightly start to react on its own. After repeating this a few times, Quinn got used to the feeling of each action and eventually was able to perform them on his own without the system's guidance. This made the timing of the skills a lot faster and the flow better. There were some skills that took more time to do that with, such as the daze, an influence skill which he still relied on the system for its help. So when he had unlocked the Shadow Eater skill, he had assumed the same. Only this time, when trying to use it, nothing would happen at all, and with no description of what the skill did, he was at a loss. Inside the game and room, he repeatedly tried everything he could with the shadow, imagining in his head what the skill would be and would try to initiate it using the shadow. After a couple of hours of trying, though, he felt like giving up. System, why can't I activate this skill? It's unlocked, right? Once again, I don't really know. Remember, I wasn't the one that created the system. I only helped design it. The system said. However, I do think there is a way you can still learn it. The only thing I can think of is to find a teacher. Another person who uses the shadow. Although, there might not even be anyone that knows how to use the shadow skill that is alive. Other than skill books. This was another way one would be able to pass down skills to others, by teaching and showing them how to use it. Family members and originals would often do this. What do you mean by that? Quinn asked. Once again, the system had decided to remain silent about his second question. Isn't the shadow an ability only compatible with vampires, though? Where the hell would I find a teacher for that? Especially if you're telling me they're all dead. Does that mean I will never be able to use this skill? Quinn was a little frustrated at the situation he was in. The skill had cost him one of the rewards he had obtained for completing the quest. Also, by being the most expensive shadow skill to unlock in his system, he thought that it would be something amazing. Something that might even greatly increase his power for the next outing, or even if unknowns were able to come after him. Who knows? The system replied. I said there might not be anyone alive. That doesn't mean there isn't anyone there. Somewhere, out on one of the beast planets, Arthur was walking by Ruby's side, when suddenly, his nose felt itchy, and a big sneeze came out. Whoa, someone must be talking about me, Arthur remarked. Inside one of the homeroom classes at the front of the class was a single person sitting at his desk. A holographic display was in front of him with a list of all the students' names in the class. Both of his hands were up by the side of his head. Any second now he felt like he would pull his hair apart. Why the hell do the school care about this crappy event so much? Dell complained. Right now, he was trying to decide who to select for the 3 events that every class had to participate in. There were more events than these, but those positions were usually taken by the second-year students, and Dell thought the same would happen this year, but it didn't seem to be the case. At first, he had sorted the list by power levels, noticing that there weren't many, and the highest power level in their class was Vorden at level 5, while right at the bottom was Quinn with the ability level of 1. Why did I have to be given a class with such weak students? He thought. He knew there was a low chance of his class performing well, and rather than that being a reflection of himself, he felt like fate had just given him a bad hand. Next, he decided to sort the list by where the student's current ranking was via points. This was based on the 2 assessments that had been done so far. The list drastically changed after that, shifting Quinn, who was right at the bottom, to near the top of the list with the rest of his teammates. A part of him wanted to select Quinn for the fighting event to see how far he would go and hopefully would learn his place, but he knew the management team would think he was crazy for selecting a level 1 student to fight. A thought then came to his head, an idea that the upper management couldn't disagree with. Not only did Dell have to pick 3 participants, but he also needed to decide 3 substitute places for the event. As long as he had some type of reasoning, then it would be fine. Just then, the classroom door opened, as the students started to filter in. It had just passed midday, and the morning off the students were able to enjoy had come to an end as they were told to head to their homeroom classes. When everyone sat in Thea's seats, Thea was a heavy atmosphere. When looking around, they noticed that many seats were left empty from those who had died. Dell quickly closed the hologram. The teachers were allowed to know the rank of everyone in the class, but the students were not, although many of them already had an idea as they could see how well others had performed. Once everyone was seated in their seats, Dell stood up from his desk and started the class. All right, everyone, there are no lessons for today, but the reason why you have all been called in is due to the upcoming event. Not all of you will be taking part in it, but there will be duties given to each student to prepare support for your school and military base. Dell then started to read groups of names in the class, telling them each what their duty would be for the event. Some were in charge of creating decorations and banners to support their base while in the crowds. Others were in charge of helping with supplies and bringing food to the event, and there were even more roles given to the others. No one was really interested in this, as everyone was wondering just who in their class would be selected for the 3 upcoming events. And finally, it was a tough decision, but now I will announce who will be participating in the upcoming 3 events. Excitement was filled in the room. A lot of the students had an idea of who would get selected for the fighting tournament, but for the other 2 events, they had no idea. First off, for the fighting tournament, I have decided to select the highest ability level and also one of the top-ranked students, Vorden Blade. As his name was called, Vorden stood up, so everyone was able to see who had been called and selected. There were no complaints from the other students, as they felt like this was the expected result. Other than Aaron, there really wasn't anyone as skillful as Vorden. They had all seen him that day in the hall fight his way out of a tough situation, only using Layla's ability. Next up, for the ranged event, I have decided to select Layla Monroe. After hearing her name, she didn't immediately stand up. She thought there must have been some type of mistake. Yes, her main weapon was a bow, but there were others in the classes that were more skilled than her. Unlike when Vorden was picked, some whispers were going around the room, as they weren't quite sure why Dell had decided this. I can see there is some confusion. The reason Layla has been selected is because of her ability. It matches well with her weapon. As you may know, the event differs slightly every year. I believe her versatile skills with using the bow will come in handy. Not only that, but she is currently one of the top students out of the first years in terms of points. This could only be possible for those that had at least some skill. Dell explained. Although there were quite a few students who still disagreed with Dell, it did feel like his reasoning made sense. Still, several of the students who contained ranged abilities were looking in her direction. They couldn't help but feel for some reason a certain group of students were getting special treatment. After getting the most points for the portal outing, and now even taking 2 of the places in class. Finally, for the crafting tournament. I believe there is only one student in our class that is currently in the crafting club, correct? Benny Lee shall be the one who will take part in the crafting tournament. The crafting tournament was for those who mainly plan to become a blacksmith or a type of tailor in the future. Their abilities usually complemented them in the forging process of creating great weapons and clothes. It was rare to have an ability that would match this, so they were quite hard to come by and highly sought out by not only different factions but the military as well. Quinn was lucky that he had found Logan to create the suit for him. Otherwise, he would have had to go off and search for a forger like Benny. Eventually, though, he knew he would have to search for one of these people in the future, if he wanted to carry on getting stronger. For him, he could rely on the shop for now, but the top equipment in the world needed to be created by top-class forgers. Quinn was a little upset that he was unable to participate in the event. He remembered Nate, who he had met in the VR game, had mentioned it multiple times. Quinn was also interested in facing him and other strong opponents. They had the plan with Vorden if anyone was ever to find out Quinn used shadow abilities. So there was a chance he could have participated in the tournament. Still, there was also the chance that there might be other vampires there who would see his ability. Day by day, Quinn could feel himself getting stronger, and it was only a matter of time before he would be able to protect himself from the threats around him. The problem was his friends. He needed to get even stronger so he could protect them as well. Now that all of the participants have been announced for the event, it's time for me to announce the substitutes. In case any of the participants get seriously injured before the event, or back out and go missing, these students shall take their place. Dell explained. For the ranged event, Silly Dundee. For the fighting event, we shall have Quinn Talen, and lastly for the crafting event, Sissy Rondo. The conversation between the students really started to heat up now, as one of the names mentioned was someone who was well known in the class for being a level 1. Recently he had been getting a lot of attention as well. Excuse me, sir, but why Quinn? Isn't he the weakest in our class? A student asked. Dell surprisingly came out with a response Quinn didn't expect. Do you really think so? If we were to go by ability level, then perhaps you could say he is the weakest, but there have been reports that he has learnt the martial arts taught by Leo quite well. And you all saw what happened when that advanced beast attacked us. Quinn was the only one brave enough to go in and try rescuing those students. Besides, it's only a substitute. Rarely has a substitute ever been called in to take part or fight in the tournament. Even though Dell seemed to be praising Quinn and giving him compliments, Quinn didn't like it one bit. He had seen Dell's strange character actions during the class's crises, and it didn't make sense for him to say these types of things. If there are no more questions, then you are free to spend time as you wish for the rest of the day, Dell said as he went up and left the classroom. All of the classes currently were doing the same thing as Dell's class, selecting students for the upcoming events and giving them each a role. While everyone was busy, inside the portal room, one of the green's portal energy started to flicker and warp. 2 guards were stationed outside by the door, while 2 guards were also stationed inside to keep a watch. They noticed the strange reaction of the portal. When something like this was happening, it meant someone was coming through from the other side. Both of them took a step back and got into a fighting position, while one of them pressed his hand up against his A. Report. Something is coming through one of the green portals. Still unidentified. We'll inform you immediately of what it is. Stepping out from the green portal was a human figure. It was a teenage boy wrapped up in a hooded cloak. He looked dirty and beat, and his skin had been darkened from the sun. The boy started to look around the room. Finally, I'm back. I can't believe it. Hey, you. Who are you? State your name. One of the guards shouted. The boy held up both of his hands to try to prove that he was innocent. Wait. I'm a student here. Check your records. The boy then took down his hood, revealing his face. See, my name's P.I.O. blank.